compromise your energy. Darling, let your spirit be free. Don't give up, keep on pushing through. Now is the time, it's all up to you. Alchemize your energy, my friend. Let your spirit be free. Don't give up, keep on pushing through. Now is the time, it's all up to you. No matter the storm, but over tragedy. No matter the storm, but over tragedy. No matter the storm, we will always take flight. Keep on pushing through the darkness of night. There's no limit, let's reach for the sky. Shine so bright, from darkness to light.
All right. Welcome to Alchemizing Energy. So we are doing a new series with a special friend of mine, Watching the World, aka Mel, also known as the Watcher, and he's going to be discussing Jesus on trial. Did Jesus exist? He's going to really discuss like different aspects of the Bible and the actual contradictions in the scriptures, and we're gonna like just check him out what he's got to say. So without further ado, I want to bring him up, but I do want to talk about the fact that he did come from the Jehovah Witness Church. He was a Bethelite for over 15 years. He spent the majority from the age of 5 like studying the scriptures, and after leaving the Jehovah Witness Church, it made him convicted to like really study the scriptures and know what he is bringing to the table now. This is a series that we're going to be doing that's going to end in his trip to Rome, because he actually literally went to Rome and he found out a lot of different stuff. So without further ado, I want to bring Mel, aka the Watcher, watching the world, to the stage. Hey, how are you doing,
Thank
Mel?
you. All right. Thank you for having me.
Right. So what we're gonna do, we're not even gonna waste any time. We're not like going to do too much BSing around. We're gonna get right to the topic. Let's discuss like what your topic is, and we're gonna bring the slide up and let you go from there. You're gonna pretty much see him and the slides, and I'm pretty much going to, let him rock from here. Shouts out, peace.
All right. Thank you very much. So, as you mentioned, I grew up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I spent most of my life studying the scriptures, obviously through the lens of Jehovah's Witness. As I got older in life, I was able to go and serve at the headquarters here in New York, which they call it Bethel. So, today I want to talk about a subject that most people don't delve into, but I want to really get into it, and that is the subject of Jesus. And I'm just going to focus on the aspect of his birth. If you could actually bring up the slide, I want to get right into the presentation. All right, so we're going to talk about the birth of Jesus, and we're just going to focus on the books of Matthew and Luke, and we're going to focus on the contradictions about his birth between the two different books. You can go to the next. All right, so just to get a landscape of what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the two different accounts of Jesus' birth. We're also going to focus on Matthew's chapter 1 and 2 and Luke chapters 1 and 2 if you want to grab your Bible just to be able to go over it. And the big point that we want to walk away with as we study this material is, why do these differences of the text, why does it matter in our personal lives when it comes to Jesus? Now, whenever you're traveling, now I just mentioned to her how I was able to go to Italy. It was a really nice trip. We enjoyed ourselves thoroughly. But one of the main points of interest is when you do travel, you have to validate yourself. Validation is a requirement What does that mean? In most cases, they want to see your birth certificate, your passport, or even your driver's license. When it comes to Jesus, we're going to look and see if we can find where the Bible specifically says when he was born. Now, we should be able to expect a reasonable amount of accuracy in the Bible, and we base that on what Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. And Monica, I'll have you read that for us. That's 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. Monica, are you there?
I'm sorry. Are you want me to bring the actual scripture up? Okay.
Yeah, I thought you were going to read the scripture. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 and 17.
All right, give me 1 second. Hold on. I wasn't prepared. My bad.
That's okay.
I was too busy trying to get people here to hear this. So give me a second. All right. All right. So chapter 2 Timothy 3:16 through 17. All scripture is God breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work.
Okay, very good. So, based on what Paul is saying here, is that all scriptures are inspired of God and beneficial for teaching. So, at the least level, we should expect that the Holy Spirit would keep. You have to go back. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that the Holy Spirit would keep the truth intact so that we could get the truth from the Bible. So today I would like to encourage everyone to approach the Bible with an open mind as we try to solve this puzzle and also understand if this is really a contradiction. There's only two books in the Bible that really get into the birth of Jesus, and that is Matthew and Luke. Yet both of these books tell a different story, completely different story. In spite of Christmas times, when they try to put the nativity scene together, they try to bring both books together to tell one story. But when you really take the time to go into the Bible, you'll see that they're telling something completely different. In fact, Matthew talks about the Magi and the star, and then Luke talks about the shepherds and the angels. So, how can these two gospels tell us the same story but so differently? Well, this presentation, we're going to explore these two different narratives and also ask the question, why does Matthew and Luke contradict each other when it comes to the birth? And also keep in mind that these two books are the only books that talk about the genealogy of Jesus. Yet, when you go through the genealogy, they actually tell two different stories as well. Before we actually read the scriptures, there's 2 points that I would like to have you keep in mind. Number one, there are two figures in the public that we need to establish when they lived so that we can understand the stories that are in the book of Matthew and Luke. Number one is Herod the Great. When was he born? He was born in 72 BCE. And he died in 4 BCE. That's a point that you really have to keep in mind. Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. The first note of interest came from Wikipedia. The second one is the Britannica, and it also shows the same information that Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. The second person that we have to look at that was a public figure was Governor Quirinius, and this information also came from the Britannica, but actually the Jewish version. And the key point that we want to keep in mind here is that he became governor in 6 AD. So this governor took office in 6 AD, and we're about to look and see why this is important when it comes to this particular story. So I'm going to have Monica read Matthew chapter 2, and we're going to go through the verses one by one. And for this particular aspect of the story, we're going to just focus on Jesus' birth as being told by Matthew. And notice how he's going to highlight that Jesus is born during the lifetime of King Herod. But Luke is going to tell us a completely different story. He's going to show that Mary was pregnant in 6 CE when the governor Quirinius became or went into office. So we're going to start with Matthew chapter 2, and we're going to go through verses 1 through 20.
Chapter 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and he came and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chiefs, priests, and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time who had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child to his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who are trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene.
Okay, very good. Excellent job reading. So, looking at the account here in Matthew, the key point that we want to take away from this is that Herod the Great put out the decree to have all the children killed under 2 in this effort to try to kill Jesus. But keep in mind that Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. Now, as we go into the book of Luke, Luke is going to give us a completely different narrative. In Matthew, we just saw how Joseph took the son Jesus and they had to flee to Egypt. Luke is going to show us how they basically dwelled in the same land of Bethlehem throughout the whole time of his younger years. Even it points out the point of how at the age of 12 he was left behind on their journey. So let's go to Luke chapter 2 and verses 1 through 7. And I'll have you read that.
In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went on their own town to register. So Joseph also went up to the town of Nazareth to Galilee, in Galilee to Judah, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house of the line of David and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the governor was installed, and notice what the scripture said in verse 5. It says that Mary is pregnant with Jesus when the governor is installed. He's installed in 6 CE. Now, keep in mind, the narrative in Matthew has already told us that Jesus was born during the life of Herod the Great. But Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. So how is it possible? This is an issue that often comes up with people that are Bible adherents, such as Christians. It's very hard to be able to balance these two different scriptures. Could you go back there, please?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. It's hard to balance the two different texts. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, notice if you look at the screen, it says, in the time of King Herod, well, he lived 37 years from 73 to 4 BCE. And then it says after he died in Matthew chapter 2, verse 19, well, we know he died in 4 BCE. But when we look into Luke, Luke says in Luke chapter 1, verse 5, in the days of Herod. So he's referencing those years between 73 and 4 BCE. But then if you look at Luke chapter 2, verse 1, it says a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was governor. And notice he became governor in 6 CE. And then in verse 5, it says to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, who was great with child. So what is the best way for us to be able to resolve this issue? In many cases, a lot of Christians, when they try to touch this point, oftentimes they say, well, maybe Quirinius was a governor at another time previous to 6 CE, but there's no proof in history that shows that he was actually a governor before this time. So it's quite clear that the Bible gives a contradiction when it comes to Jesus' birth of at least a whole decade. And going back to how we started this presentation, when it comes to an individual's birth, that's one of the main factors in trying to validate that a person existed. To add to this, we would go to Acts chapter 5 and verse 37. And this is going to give us another reference point. I'm going to have you read that, Monica. Acts chapter 5, verse 37. We're
After
going to see
him,
another. What's
go
that?
ahead. Go ahead. You want us to go ahead and I'll start? No,
Yes,
just let
go
me
ahead.
know when to read. Just say read.
Yes, go ahead.
After him, Judas the Galilean appeared in the days of the census and led a band of people in revolt. He too was killed, and all his followers were scattered.
Okay, so for all the people that try to say that Quirinius served as governor maybe prior to around the time of 4 BCE, well, we see another Bible account in Acts chapter 5 and verse 37 where Judas of Galilee, he was actually killed in 6 CE due to an uprising about the same census that was conducted here in Luke chapter 2 when Mary was pregnant with Jesus, some 10 years after what is given in Matthew chapter 2 as well. So, do you have any questions at this point, Monica?
So yes, I do. So the main thing of this whole conversation was like, trying to understand Jesus's why would we think that Jesus would not, exist. So let's go into it. Okay.
Okay.
Why is the name Jesus so common in historical records from the first century?
Well, primarily, first off, it's the name Jesus is actually given in the book of Matthew. The angel actually is the person that actually in the book of Luke 2, it tells Mary what to name her son. But in the Hebrew scriptures, which we could say that the New Testament derives off of the Hebrew scriptures, there's no mention of Jesus at all.
Interesting. So who was Josephus and why? And what did he say about people named Jesus?
Well, Josephus was a historian during the first century, and he wrote various books. Jesus died in 33 CE. That's what most people think. Josephus, the historian, was born in 37 CE, which was about 4 years after the death of Jesus, and he died around 96 CE. And the only time that he spoke about Jesus, the one that most people refer to in the Bible, is about 4 years before he died. He actually wrote about Jesus. He made one statement basically saying that James had a brother named Jesus, referring to that. And then most Bible scholars think that that is a conspiracy. So,
What distinguishes the Jesus of the New Testament from other men with the same name?
well, when it comes to Josephus, he talked about various Jesus, right? There was one Jesus in particular that would always use the terms woe to you Pharisees and woe to this and woe to that, which if you go to Matthew chapter 25, you'll find those statements being made. But then there were other Jesuses that they actually used to kind of meld into one Jesus. So they were pulling different statements and different storylines from different Jesuses.
All right. So how did the title Christ become associated with Jesus?
Well, Christ is actually a Greek word, Christos, in reference to what would go back to being the original Hebrew word Mashiach, which means Messiah. And so, because Jesus is often, well, in most cases, people, when they refer to Jesus, they think it automatically refers to the Messiah or the Christ, but it doesn't. Um, Jesus would have been the natural born the person that referenced in the scriptures that we went over earlier. But as far as the Messiah would have had a different role. In the Hebrew scriptures, the Jews were expecting the Messiah to come. And so whoever wrote the New Testament, they wrote it in a way where the Messiah would fill the role of the promised one that was supposed to be coming. And so that's why in the New Testament, you have the Messiah, he's raising the dead, he's healing the sick, he's turning water into wine and doing all these things, but none of those things were necessarily prophesied from the Hebrew scriptures. So in essence, you have two different messiahs. The one from the Hebrew scriptures is not the same as the one in the New Testament, but most Christians would tend to believe that to be the case. And when it comes to Jesus, the natural born individual, when you really when you really separate him from the miracles, then you really don't have a Messiah. You just have a regular guy who is not performing any miracles. But most people tend to want to associate Jesus with the miracles, and that's why they look at him as being this great Messiah.
What are the main points in how Christians and Jewish interpretations of the Messiah differ? Like, if Jesus didn't reveal the temple, like I think that there was a part in the Messiah thing when it comes to the Jews, uh, where it says there was a temple supposed to be rebuilt or something like that. So, can you explain, like, if Jesus didn't rebuild the temple, how did Christianity justify calling him the Messiah?
In the Hebrew scriptures, there are various prophecies in connection to the Messiah. Have you ever stopped to wonder why the Jews don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah? It's because the Messiah had very distinct characteristics that the Jews were looking for. There's actually a scripture that says that he would have kids. He was supposed to rebuild the temple. He was supposed to unite the entire world under basically one fold and belief. Every knee would bend. There were so many things that the Messiah is prophesied to do. However, when Jesus came, he performed a lot of miracles, allegedly. He did a lot of things that would not even tie him to the Hebrew Messiah that most individuals were looking for. So that's
So
why
you're saying that
here, here in
the
New
miracles were not a part of the Old Testament. Were those miracles a part of the Old Testament prophecies of a Messiah?
Yeah, you would be hard pressed to go back and find where it would say he would be turning water into wine and raising the dead and doing all these type of things.
How did different historical and mythological figures contribute to the Jesus story?
Well, I don't know if you've ever been, probably not. I'll give you one example. Actually, a guy named Jabari that's actually on Sanetta's channel. He gives a good tour. But if you go to the Metropolitan Museum, you'll see that different storylines that are found in the New Testament that they actually come out of Kemet. I'm not saying all of them, but there are a few points of interest that are very similar to the storylines of individuals like Horus and the whole storyline. But for the most part, a lot of what we find in the New Testament is actually comes from the Hebrew scriptures, as though whoever wrote the New Testament, they were writing it in a way where this Jesus would be fulfilling various prophecies from the Hebrew scriptures.
Mm. Silky, do you have a question that you want to ask? You have a question, or you want to wait? Because I have like a whole lot of questions, but I want to see if you want to wait until
Well, I'll
somebody.
throw one out there real quick. So regards to Kemet and doesn't all that kind of predate the Hebrew, right? And not to mention Egypt is where everybody went to learn. The education was in Egypt, right?
Correct.
So that would probably be your. I mean, not even to say Egypt. We can go as Nubia, Kush, but that would probably be where your first point of scripture or scrolls you would probably want to start at, right?
Yeah, that's in line with what I was saying. When I went to Italy, what I really discovered just by going there and also doing some independent studying is that a lot of their gods came obviously from Greece and the influence that came from Greece. And then also,
That's
as I
right.
just mentioned, when you go to the Metropolitan Museum, you'll see that the Greeks, they took their information from Egypt. So it all falls right in line. I mean, there are a lot of different, they're all from the same area. And at some point, a lot of them were under the same Roman influence, under the authority of Rome. So that would explain too why there's such a mixture of information. But like you said, it all from what I've gathered, it all starts back in Egypt.
What are the key arguments against Jesus being the prophesied Messiah?
Jesus,
Well,
Jesus. It's
so
Latin for one.
I I'm having trouble hearing what he's saying. Can
Oh
you
yeah,
say that one more time?
your phone is kind of like loud or something like that.
It's
Yeah, it's
choppy or
kind of like
something.
yeah. But I was asking you,
Oh,
what are
I have the question though. I'll answer it. If
okay?
he
Go
doesn't
ahead.
have anything to say. Um, well, the biggest part is that a lot, like I said, the prophecies. Like if you were to come to New York and sit down with an actual the Jews that we see here in this area, they would, and you try to tell them that Jesus, anything about Jesus, they're going to say you're crazy because Jesus didn't fulfill most of the prophecies that are told in the Hebrew scriptures. Now I know that the Hebrew Israelites, they're going to take that and say, "Oh, you're crazy." What? Well, that's the truth. There's a reason why, because Jesus, there were so many things that Jesus didn't do. He didn't rebuild the temple. I mean, the list actually goes on and on. We could do a whole show of breaking down having a kid, but I could give you an example. Let me just give you an example to help you understand. In Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14, right? Um, that's where the whole birth story that's given in Matthew, in the beginning of Matthew, that's where it stems from. Now, in the New Testament, Paul, the gospel writers, and Jesus himself, they're all quoting from the Greek Septuagint, which was allegedly a translation from the original Hebrew, right? That's up for a little debate. But when they translated the original Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14, when they translated it to the Greek Septuagint, which is the main reference point for a lot, even the King James Bible, there was a mistranslation which triggered this whole story about the birth of Jesus. Let me explain. In Isaiah
you're
chapter
kind of
7, verse,
you're kind of stepping in deep water right now with saying that the King James Bible was influenced by that. Is that where that's the Bible you use, the KJV?
so let me be clear. My statement was, right, that the King James Bible even references the Greek Septuagint. So when they
Uh,
translated and they created the King James Bible, right, they reference the Greek Septuagint.
oh, they reference it. What did you do? You know what they used to translate the King James Bible?
I know that that's one of the references was the Greek Septuagint.
Okay, so let me break this down for you. So the King James Bible is translated off the Geneva Bible. The Geneva Bible, the King James took, I think, what, like 20% of the KJV Bible is supposedly directly translated from the Geneva, and 80% of that is just supposed to be like kind of BS, kind of King James in his scriptures.
Yeah, but when you go to the King James, it actually tells you that it did reference the Greek Septuagint Bible, and
Because
that's my only
okay,
point.
well, okay, because you're going off the Greek and you keep saying Hebrew, but in the Geneva Bible it says Black Moors.
Okay,
And when you speak of the Hebrew, so supposedly y'all was supposedly ruling Spain. The Hebrews are supposedly
I'm I'm I'm
fought had
not
a war. And stuff.
I'm not a Hebrew, so I'm not gonna go down this whole Hebrew journey.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's bad.
But
I got you.
Yeah, he's not a
I'm just
Hebrew Israelite.
I'm making very clear and distinct points because I'm trying to lead the audience. I'm trying to make a point. So now I'm totally thrown off. I mean I get your point. We could go back to it, but I'm trying to make a point as to how Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14 led to the creation of the story in Matthew about the birth of Jesus.
So, how did the early Christian movement reshape the narrative of Jesus?
So that's gonna throw us off again.
Okay, I'm sorry. So, should I go to the okay?
These
Well, that was actually the next question because we went into the key arguments against Jesus being prophesied the Messiah. And then the next question is, how did the early Christian movement shape the narrative? So, do you want to go into something else before we get into that?
When you study the Emerald Tablets, the Nag Hammadi scripts, or the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Can you hear?
could you hear
Hello?
me? Could you hear me good?
No, I think
I think
his screen's frozen.
who's
Hey, Mel.
yeah, he froze. Okay, yeah, I'm about to say he's froze on my side too.
Yeah.
I'll fall back though. It look like y'all having a decent little convo, but
No, I definitely want to. I want you to like ask certain questions because you know that. Hold on, he's gonna come back. But
where JJ at? JJ in backstage?
I don't know. I thought he was gonna come up. You know, because we're getting to the end of my questions. But I think that is he gonna come back up? Okay, hold on. Okay, I don't know what's going on. My child got my phone. Hold on, one quick. What up? Let me see. All right, so
Apollo, I know you're not talking noise. Why don't you click the link, Apollo, if you really want some? Stop being scary, dude. Click the link. These niggas, boy, they love to wait out in the motherfucking
I don't
hide
know
in
if
the
his
bushes,
phone.
man. Stop
Hold on,
hiding,
let
man.
me
Come
call.
from up under that rock, man. Stop hiding. Come up out the shadows.
Give me 1 second. Let me call his phone. Hold on.
Yeah, man. I be out here dropping the knowledge, boy. Y'all lucky I'm even out here.
Give me 1 second because my daughter got my phone. Hold on. I think his phone might have died. Hold on, or his computer might have. Oh, here we go. Here he comes. What's your computer died?
No, I don't know. That was weird. I don't know what the
It just completely just went out. That's weird.
yeah. So anyway,
Okay, so let's go into where were we at when we like left off? Hold on. What were you saying? Rather than me going into the questions, I want you to just make your, just free flow, and then let me know because I just have certain questions. You know where I'm leading into is the Christian aspect of why, because you went to Rome, so you got to get more information about when you went there about what was going on. So let's go.
okay. So I don't recall what your last question was, so I'll just start anew. But anyway, what's your name, brother?
I go by Professor Silky D.
Oh, okay. I didn't totally capture that. Um, do you have a Christian background?
Nah.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. All right. So, um, as far as so I'll finish. I'll go back to the point I was making. As far as in the book of Matthew, it talks about the birth of Jesus. Are you very familiar with the Hebrew scriptures, by the way?
I'm a little bit familiar with the stuff.
Oh, okay. All right, good deal. So in Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14, it talks about um in the Greek Septuagint it says a virgin, but in the original Hebrew it said young woman. So whoever translated it from the Hebrew to the Greek Septuagint, they used the term virgin. And so because the gospel writers were using the Greek Septuagint Bible, you could actually see where they're quoting it. The word virgin is in the Greek Septuagint, so that's why Matthew writes a whole narrative about Jesus being born of a virgin. And so that's an example of how the Bible writers were using the Greek Septuagint, but also a lot of these prophecies that were supposedly coming out of the Hebrew scriptures, they were writing the New Testament to try to create this Jesus to fulfill all of these different prophecies. And that's why you get a wrong story about him being born of a virgin by means of a mistranslation from the Greek Septuagint, because the original Hebrew does not have that. So that's how I would answer your last question, Monica.
Let me ask you, since okay, since you kind of heavy on the Hebrew, let me ask you about that ready. What does the ready mean?
The ready?
Yeah, you ain't never heard the ready in the Hebrew.
No, I'm not a Hebrew Israelite or into the Hebrew. Today I'm focusing on a key point, and that is about Jesus' birth and
Okay, the virgin birth.
the contradiction in the Bible as far as his birth. And I went through Matthew, and Matthew says that Jesus was born during the time of Herod the Great. Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. And then in the book of Luke, it says that Mary, she's pregnant with Jesus in 6 CE, which is 10 years later. So Luke and Matthew are giving you over a decade of time difference when it comes to the birth of Jesus. So if in our culture of black people especially, we're so entrenched in
But then
Jesus.
none of them walk with Jesus, though, right?
What's that?
None of them walk with Jesus, right? Didn't none of them really know Jesus personally?
Yeah, but when it comes to Christians, right? Many of us, our lives have been so deeply entrenched in Jesus. So we're discussing tonight how a basic question about his birth can help us to understand critical thinking. That's all. This is just strictly about critical thinking, because when I grew up in the religion as a child, I didn't get a choice from my parents saying, "Hey, go worship Jesus or go worship Jehovah or go worship this and that." And critical thinking was frowned upon in the religion that I was a part of. So now we're just employing a little critical thinking. And one of the things that we're just discussing tonight is about, if you look
You
at his
said
birth,
frowned
there's a
upon,
contradiction.
as in meaning like frowned upon as in they hate black people. What do you mean by frowned upon?
Say that one more time.
You said you was frowned upon in your religion, right?
Yeah,
You said
it's
something like
frowned
that.
upon. Yeah, as a Jehovah's Witness, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. It's frowned upon
Oh,
to
okay,
ask
you're Jehovah's
questions.
Witness. All right. Oh, you know the
To
Bible
ask
for real.
questions to ask questions and to say, "Hey, did Jesus really exist?" And you start asking questions like, why does the Bible contradict the birth of Jesus? As a Jehovah's Witness, they would excommunicate you and call you an apostate, and you can no longer talk to your family. So this stuff is real serious. It may not be serious for you from the religion that you may or may not had, but for many people, it's serious business.
And then, supposedly Cain and Abel populated the globe.
Yeah, that's
You
according
had
to the
two
Bible.
sons. That's another contradiction.
Yeah. So either
That one's
I
on the
think
house.
their explanation is that Adam and Eve had more daughters, and they would have had to cohabitated with
Why
their
they not in the
sister.
script? Why it ain't in the script then? Sure, I don't add.
But those are the type of questions that if you start asking those type of questions, you know, depending on the religion that you're in, they'll try to kick you out.
Do you
I mean,
believe
this
that?
is legitimate. Yeah, they got a lot of stuff to answer
Listen, do
to.
you believe that Christianity is a cult? Do you believe that it was a cult? And here's the
Yeah,
thing:
it's
what
it's all
role?
it's
Let me just
it,
ask this. I'm gonna merge these questions together. Do you believe Christianity was a cult? And what role did the Roman Empire and Greek culture play in redefining Jesus as the Christ? So how did they come up with that? If you're saying that it wasn't a Hebrew thing, it wasn't like a Israelite thing, and this is like there was several Jesuses, and this and this. So now you have the Roman Empire. Or do you think the Roman Empire like pushed this whole idea out?
Well, that's, you know what? It's crazy because, like, you know what? We can get into dates. You can get into Mauritania. You can get into Columbus. You can get into Moors getting expelled from Spain. Like, so when they're talking about who's really in control, you know what I'm saying? Like, who was really in control and who would stand to benefit from all this, I guess, all the distortion that we got right now. We know it was high education. We know it was technology. We know we was advanced civilizations. Now we just need to figure out is like how that lasted all the way up until when, and then all of a sudden they claim they hit the lights. Like you can almost see the reset button in and what is it, 1492, when they claim Columbus came over here, because they didn't like all the architectural work, the colleges, the education all came from Moors and it all came from Africa and stuff. Like you had tons of colleges in Spain. You had colleges in Egypt. Europe didn't have no colleges. Rome didn't have no colleges.
Right.
They
So
wasn't
hold
up
on.
on none of that.
So real quick, because I really asked a direct question. I really want to get this question answered because that's what this is about. Give me a second to like get him to answer that question. So we kind of like that. We kind of moored off, went off to the Moors. Okay, it was a very direct question. Is Christianity a cult? All right, that's number one. And number two is what role did the Roman Empire and Greek culture play in redefining Jesus as the Christ? Mel, please answer that question. Go ahead, and I'm going to put you on the big screen to answer that question. Go ahead.
Well, in accordance to my opinion, all religions are a cult. When you get down to the nitty gritty and you look at how they um, were created by man, then you could only come to a reasonable explanation of how they are cults. I know it's tough for a lot of people to try to understand that, but I would challenge anyone when it comes to the scriptures. To answer your other question about Jesus and the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire had a big influence on the Christian faith. Um, but remember, Jesus, when he died, he was a Jew. He wasn't a Christian. In fact, the word Christian was mentioned by the Apostle Paul later, and they were using the word Christian as a derogatory word, just like people would say the N word today. They're saying, hey, those Christians. But that word stuck and has become one of the largest religions of our day. Um, but let's get into it a little deeper. The Jews during the time of the first century, they had various groups. You had the Essenes, you had the Ebionites, which were called the Way People. You had the Sakaris, who were very rebellious. They would go into the temple in Jerusalem and they would take a knife and just dagger someone with a knife and run off back into the outskirts of the city. So there was a lot of uprising when it came to the Jews. So in 66 CE, when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, that's when it finally fell in 70. That's when you have the books associated with Christianity. You have the book of Mark was written in the early 70s. Then you had the book of Matthew, which was written probably 5 to 10 years later. Then Luke, and then you had the book of John, probably written anywhere between 90 all the way out to 120. But going back to Mark being the first book, Mark doesn't talk about the birth of Jesus at all. And in fact, in Mark chapter 16, when Jesus dies and the three women go to his tomb, It just says that there's a man sitting there wearing white, which you would imagine that for your imagination, you think he's an angel. And the scripture says they ran off and they told no one. Okay. But later, the scribes wrote this whole story about how Jesus went and then he saw Mary while he was walking. Then he saw some of the other apostles and then he went and met. So then they write this whole story about him. If you're a Christian or what have you, you could be able to grab snakes, poisonous snakes, and it won't affect you. All these things are written later, and a lot of it is just literature. So after the temple, they had the big fall of the temple in Jerusalem is when you have all of these writings that kick off. Now, the Apostle Paul, his writings are allegedly dated late 40s into the 50s, but Paul's writings are quite contrary to what Jesus wrote. In fact, you could also question if it's the same religion, right? Here's an example. When the rich man asked Jesus, actually it says he's a lawyer. He asked Jesus, what do I have to do, to have everlasting life? And Jesus told him to keep the commandments. You need to love God and keep the commandments. In Matthew, when you go to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says that anyone that even in a small way deter from the law, then that's a very bad thing. But when you have the Apostle Paul, Paul is saying, what? You don't have to follow the law. So if that same rich man had went to Paul maybe 20 years later after Jesus died and asked the same question, Paul would have gave him a completely different answer. So to answer your question, though, we have to think from the standpoint of the Jews, because remember I told you Jesus died as a Jew. And when you factor in the fact that he promoted following the law, then you have to really think about the Apostle Paul as being the person to have he's the one that developed this Christian religion that you're questioning me about, because Paul made it possible for people that were Jews. Now you don't have to keep the law. You don't have to do all of these things that, in fact, Paul said the law was such a burden on individuals. And so now you have Christians who are not doing the things that the Jews have to do. And they have more of what I would call a liberal religion. But whoever wrote those books, which you could tell it has the Greeks' influence, it has the Jews' influence, and the Bible says it's individuals who are not lettered, low educated, right? But when you really study the scriptures, you'll see that whoever wrote those books were very highly educated individuals. And so one philosophy that I kind of think has a lot of meat to it is that during the first century, you had Jews that were tax collectors. They had, actually, when I went to Rome, even now, there's a lot of Jews that are in government. No different back then. The Jews were very prominent, and they were sick of the militant Jews who were killing people in the temple. It was those Jews that caused the temple in Jerusalem to fall in 70 CE. And so those individuals probably had a key hand in writing the New Testament so as to dumb down or to teach a different way. Because if you really look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, take some time and research the Dead Sea Scrolls, they date back to 200 BCE. And those Jews who wrote those Dead Sea Scrolls, they didn't write literature about a man named Jesus turning water into wine and doing all of this, raising the dead. They were trying to put their foot up Rome's rear end. They hated the Romans. They wanted to destroy the Romans in every way. So when you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, you get the real heart of a man. You could see the anger. They're very upset. They want their people to have freedom. They also have a righteous teacher. And so whoever wrote the New Testament, more than likely, they
So,
wrote it based on um, the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they wrote it in a more um, they wrote it as literature so as to brainwash people, kind of like what's happening today when you look at people that are in the church. They're
so do you think
so
that the Roman Empire like created Jesus in order to
no,
have
no,
a
they
Messiah
didn't
or something they
they
believed in or to
they no
control?
they didn't create Jesus, but what they did, they commandeered the movement in 325 CE at the Council of Nicaea. I mean, they had their tentacles in the religion already, but that's when they really took it over after Constantine converted to Christianity. Because if you really want to understand the religion, you have to follow the money. And when you go to Rome, all you see is money. And who benefits the most? Who's bringing in most of the money from the movement? It's the Roman Catholic Church. And that has trickled down to all these other religions because if you look at the various churches, all they do is peddle money. If you want to be blessed, you got to give a little money. Pastor gonna talk about tithing about 10 times every service, and then after you give your tithe, he wants you to give some seed money. So think about it. The God of the universe, in order for him to help you with your cancer or help you pay your bills, you got to give your money. You're already struggling, but he wants your seed money so God can bless you. So when you follow the money, you'll see that the Romans basically commandeered the movement. But I think they used the Apostle Paul to do that.
And that's going to be like, so
That's
that's
my opinion. The Apostle Paul, he was actually making up scriptures. I'm putting together a whole series now where I'll show you how Paul deliberately changed the scriptures around so that he could prove his point. Remember, Paul is also the first one that's saying, "Hey, you should give money to your leaders of the faith." So that's where Pastor gets it from. He gets it from the Apostle Paul. Paul says, I mean, Jesus touches on it too, but the problem is when I grew up in the faith, you really don't. All you just focusing on key scriptures. Jehovah's Witnesses have you reading, certain scriptures just so you can go knock on somebody's door and try to convert them. But when you see now that I study the scriptures deeply, you see Jesus say that a man should cut off his private if he could do so for the kingdom. You're like, what was he smoking? You know? So those are the type of things now that I start to realize that there's a deep agenda in the scriptures, and they reveal the nature of man. It's no different than the last time when we talked about how in Deuteronomy it sanctions rape, slavery. All of these are agendas of men.
here's a question. So
And
to show the positives, what you just said, she said Jesus never said that you should cut off your privacy. Where is that at? Where you should cut off your genitals?
well, he talks about there are some men that are eunuchs by birth, and then he says that there's some eunuchs by force, and then Jesus says there are some eunuchs for the kingdom. Well, what does it mean to be a
What verse is that
what
in?
does
What, I need to bring that
hold
up or
on?
something. Okay.
So so you're throwing me off now. So
No.
to be a eunuch for the kingdom's sake means that you're cutting off your male parts so you can be focused on the kingdom. So it is in the Bible.
Give me the scripture so I can bring it up. But she's saying that doesn't. She said, "Get the verse."
You can move on. You can move on to your next question. I'll get it and come back.
Okay. So you want to? Okay. If Jesus wasn't the prophesied Messiah, what does that mean for modern Christianity?
It means that they're just they're in a religion just like everybody else is.
Or a cult, right?
Yeah, that's bit. There's no way to really sugarcoat it. And listen, I'm not trying to knock people that are believing. I mean, I think a person when they're in the hospital fighting cancer or whatever, people need something to believe in. Um, you might want to believe in the stars. One person wants to believe in God or whatever, but any religion that I challenge anyone in any religion you have, it stems from men.
Definitely
This
that.
whole
But
concept, this whole
let me
concept of God talking to you.
that part. Let me chime in on the whole eunuch thing. Let me clarify the eunuch. What exactly is a eunuch? What a eunuch does, and where they're
Matthew
getting at.
chapter 19, verse 12.
Well, I'm gonna give you the just the whole definition and where they come, what eunuchs do. So the eunuchs
But I want
are
to
your.
answer her question. It was
Well, let
Matthew
me just break down the
19:12.
eunuch real quick. I see people want to know, they don't really know what a eunuch is. So a eunuch is a temple advisor. They're usually going to be a political government. They can be guards. They're going to be always right next to the king. Those are your eunuchs. They're also your wise men. They're also your high priest. Those are all eunuchs. But the reason that they have supposedly make them cut off their stuff is because they're next to the king and they don't want the eunuchs supposedly sleeping with the queen. That's the reason why they claim they make them cut off their stuff. But I mean, the eunuchs though are kind of in control. The eunuchs are the ones really behind the scenes, making everything happen. You know what I'm saying? Because they're right next to the king. They're the one who has the king's ear. They're the one pushing the paperwork, persuading them, doing all like think about like Jafar and Aladdin next to the king, persuading, all those type of things. That's the things that the eunuchs were doing.
So is a eunuch also a transgender? Because doesn't transgender cut their member off? And
No,
all
that's
right, so
not a
here,
trans.
so,
That's going too far with
all right,
it.
never
The
mind. Okay,
eunuch, the eunuch
Yeah.
the king didn't want somebody messing with his wife or what
Right.
have you, or
Yeah.
have a
He didn't want his
concubine.
wife touched
So
by the people.
all right. So
in
let me
order for
read.
you to
Let me
serve,
read Matthew.
hold on, let me get the point out. In order for you to be able to serve, you would have to either by force cut it off. But Jesus is saying in this verse that if you could do it on your own for the kingdom, then that's a great thing. Go ahead.
So I'll read it. Okay, so what it says. Matthew 19:12. For there are eunuchs who were born that way. There are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. There are those who chose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it. So it sounds to me like because I think cut off your rod for is he aware that there's figurative verse that there is a figurative verse in prose, men and women do make a vow of celibacy. Well, he does it. That's addressed in this. He says there are those who chose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom. So there's a distinction between a eunuch that are born that way. That means that maybe they can't use their thing. There are
Yeah,
eunuchs who have been
there are
made
people that are
eunuchs by
born with
others.
there are people that are born that have defects and they don't have a penis or what have you.
Right, and there's eunuchs who have been made eunuchs. That means by others.
Yeah, that means they're grooming them. That means they're grooming them from birth. That means they're coming from a family line, and they're gonna already be serving in the temple. Is what that's why they're saying they're already eunuchs, and then you got people that convert, I guess, and they're trying to get in the kingdom.
Right. And
You be
then I
like, you
think
know
that
what I'm
I
saying?
don't know. So Scan Chan brought up Deuteronomy 23:1. If a man's testicles are crushed or his penis cut off, he may not be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. So let's go. Winter just joined real quick. So let's go. Let me remove this so I can see everybody here. Go ahead, Winter. Is that Napa?
Yeah, hi.
Hey, no, what's up? Well, like winter. Who the hell is winter? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, that's a great scripture. I was just gonna say, hello, peace to you. I'm gonna leave, but that doesn't mean Jesus isn't telling anybody to cut their rod off. First off, Jesus followed all the law, and it's against the law, as you see the person who put Deuteronomy 23. You are not to be a eunuch in the kingdom or in to serve the Most High. It's against Jewish law, or I'm sorry, it's the law of Israel. So let's see, Deuteronomy 23:1 says, no one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting their male member off may enter the assembly of the Lord. King James Version is, he that is wounded in the stones or has his private member cut off, will not enter the congregation. So people who twist that and say, Jesus said to cut your rod off, you can easily show the law. And it's not disputed that Jesus followed the law. He says, follow the law. Jesus would never encourage a man to cut his rod off. That is figurative. And if you go pull it back up again, I can read it again for you, where it doesn't say, and if you want to actually cut your rod off, it's talking about figurative if you want to be celibate. And there's other things too. There's other things to read into it. It's not just about sexuality. Matthew chapter 19:12, you have the New International Version, which is easier for people to interpret anyway. For there are eunuchs who were born that way, disability, and then there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, cut off. And then there are those who choose to live like eunuchs. They choose celibacy for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept this. But Jesus never said, cut your rod off. He was a Jew, right? You agree that Jesus was a Jew, right?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And I would address all the other stuff you're saying about the historicity of Christ later. I'd like to address that. I'm listening. It's very interesting, but just wanted to come in and clear that up. If Jesus was a Jew, Jesus was adamantly opposed, according to the law, opposed to men cutting their penises off.
And hold on
hold on 1 second. Let me counter. I can actually show you where Bart Ehrman explains the exact same thing that I did. So there are, we could dispute it. Nobody's authority on this subject matter. But you have Bible scholars that I could name maybe 3 or 4 that have the same line of reasoning. So it might be, that's your position. This is my position. I tend to lean more with Bart Ehrman on it.
Well, Bart Ehrman, if you lean toward Bart Ehrman, sir, then you wouldn't be sitting up here saying that there's no historicity of Jesus, because Bart Ehrman has done extensive studies and he says that Jesus is historically real. Since you're bringing up Bart Ehrman.
Okay, so now you're putting words into my mouth. You're going off of what someone else told you, right?
No,
I did not specifically say that. So I could tell you either get this from somebody else. You didn't get that from me as far as the historicity of Jesus, because I'm right there with Bart Ehrman on the same subject. So just
you say that
you have to follow me very carefully. I did not address that yet as far as my stance on where Jesus is. I gave you, I don't know where you came in on this conversation, but I've been very careful as to what I'm saying. I have not revealed my total stance on Jesus yet, so I don't know where you're getting that from.
Okay, let me respond to you. I've been watching since the beginning, and from what I've been listening to, which is interesting, you've been making different types of points that there are different Jesuses, this and that. So let me ask you clearly. You agree that according to the book, the person in the gospel that's spoken of, not different people named Jesuses, not different Jesuses. You are agreeing with Bart Ehrman when he says that there was a historical Jesus? I'm asking.
I agree with Bart Ehrman when he says that there was a person that's being referenced to as Jesus, that the storyline, I actually said that when I said even in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they had a leader that was called the righteous teacher, that the idea of Jesus could have stemmed from, as well as other places, or there could have been an individual walking around named Jesus, or there could have been multiple people, which Josephus says that there were many Jesuses, right? That they all could have gotten certain ideas from. But as far as Jesus and the Christ, that's two different things.
Okay. So we
Because
Mhm.
because as a miracle worker, here's where I'm very clear. I
Okay.
can't tell you if Monica exists or not or whatever. I haven't met her in person, right? Okay, so same way with Jesus. I wasn't there. But as far as a miracle worker who was raising the dead, walking on water, no, I do not believe that that individual existed.
Okay.
So
So
that's my distinction. As far as a Jesus go, there could have been, but as far as a miracle worker, that's where you're going to run in trouble. Most Bible scholars, it's very hard to find ones that want to die on that hill.
okay. Are you? Can I speak now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you do agree. I'm not talking about a bunch of guys out there like that are doing the yard named Jesus. I'm saying in the text that's examined by Bart Ehrman and other historians, you believe that there's a historical Jesus, that Jesus that's spoken of in there is legitimately historical, because Bart Ehrman doesn't believe his research. He's come to the conclusion as an agnostic. I think he's now atheist, but he's come to the conclusion after decades of research and examination that that person spoken of in that text is historically real. Now,
Well,
theologically,
let me tell you.
I'm gonna hand it back. I didn't want to interrupt you, so
Okay,
I
all right.
waited till you finished.
I'm sorry.
Just,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. So I get it. You align with Bart Ehrman where you don't believe in a theological Jesus, but the Jesus spoken of in the text, in the Gospels, Bart Ehrman says this Jesus in these Gospels is historically real. Do you also align with him on that?
Okay, I have to explain it. Okay, because I side with him a little bit, and I talk to the guy all the time, right? And I don't think he's being 100% honest. So that's why, and I think it has to do with him being the instructor at our school. So he's not going to reveal his true nature. But that's he's not on record, so I'll leave it there.
He's not on record what?
Here's what I'll say. What's that?
You said he's not on record doing what?
He's not on record giving his true stance about Jesus.
But so you're saying he's lying to the public about all his research that he's presenting, saying
I'm just saying I'm saying he's no Don. I talk to the guy all the time. I'm just saying he's no Donald Trump where he's going to reveal his total hand
okay.
because it's the school that we're a part of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
His
lot of
school. You're talking about his
it's a lot
school,
of it's a lot
right?
of
Are
Chapel Hill.
I want to, when I jump in, I want you to clarify when you say the school. Are you talking about his school?
I'm talking about Chapel Hill. So
Okay, great. And you
so
are one of his students, right?
yeah,
So all the work that
but
he's presenting for throughout the decades, that he's saying, look, there's a historical Jesus, the one in the
I
Bible.
was about to explain that to you though. You didn't
Yeah,
give me
so
a
is he,
chance.
I want you to be clear because you're saying he's not being honest and forthright.
No, I'm just saying he's not revealing his whole hand, but I'll explain to you. I'll explain to you according to what he says, okay? And I align with that to a certain extent. The first book of the Gospels that's written is Mark, okay? Mark does not talk about the birth. He doesn't talk about the death, right? I mean, the resurrection, okay? That individual that's written in that particular book of Mark, in my opinion, seems to be a real person. But as the other books are written, they embellish the story more and more. And I gave an example about Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14, how the whole birth story came off of a mistranslation from the Greek Septuagint, right? So that person in Mark, there's a resemblance of a real person where this whole idea came from. Was he the Son of God? Did he even say in Mark that he was God? No, he never said he was God. People like Wesley, this guy that debated, whatever his name was, he thinks that Jesus says he's God in every chapter. I don't believe that. So that's where I see some light and some truth there, that in the book of Mark there may be a resemblance of a real guy or multiple guys. It still wouldn't take away whoever wrote that book could have known about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it could have been the story could have been made up, right? Because the reason I say that is because look how much stuff they made up in the other books. In the book of Matthew, that birth story is made up. Bart Ehrman will tell you that. In a lot of his lectures, and he's not the only professor that I even would want to even listen to. I don't agree with Bart on everything. I'm all, but anyway, the death narrative, it gives you a completely different story for each book of the Bible, of the Gospels. There's just so many discrepancies, and I went over the one tonight about even his birth. We can't even get his birth date within a 10-year window. Doesn't that bother you? I mean, and I see you all
Well,
the time, Nepal. I mean,
let
we
me
haven't
answer
talked,
this.
but
Let
I
me
know
answer.
you're highly intelligent. I know
No,
you have
no,
to.
listen, my friend, I'm not going to take your show over. I just want to come in and clarify about that scripture. But yes, all historians and people who want the truth, the first thing they're going to do is go to the text and see all those. There's a lot of, it's all theology. Well, it's like 95% theology. No, I'll say 90% theology and then 10% history. And that's why it's such a huge task for everyone to take on. You, not just Bart Ehrman, you, me, anyone who wants to know the truth about any particular, individual in history, especially someone so influential as Jesus, you're going to have to sift through all of that theology. Yes, Kemet is, there's stories that are, you can see them in Kemet. You can see them in, not just in Kemet, you can see them in Sumerian texts. You can see them in even Hindu text, right? Krishna, Christ. So all of that is mixed in. And then you have the great task, and I have the task of sifting through all the theology, looking at all the dates that are off and saying, is this a historical person? But I heard you say, for Mark, you can, you're leaning towards, okay, I can see this as someone who actually existed. I didn't even know that. So you clarified that for me. I've been listening. So your position, I get what you're saying. You're looking at the entire book, right? The Bible, especially the Gospels, and let's not even get into Paul. I align with you 100% about Paul. That's a different Christianity than the Christianity.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I get it. So it's not like you're saying, I'm absolutely 100% sure that this Jesus never existed, but you're like, look, we got to look at all this other stuff in here and we can't ignore it. Correct? Or am I?
He's only in Mark to me. If he's there, he's going to be in Mark.
Okay. All right. So got it. I can leave now. I don't want to keep on, you weren't even finished. I know I jumped in because you said that one thing about the.
Wait, hold on. What before you leave the pot, I want you to address the whole thing about the virgins, that young women were a young woman would be a virgin. Didn't you say something like that to that?
Oh yeah, that's not just what I heard from Mel, but so many people that are doing the whole virgin birth debate versus Jesus had sex with Joseph. I mean, not Jesus, excuse me. Mary had sex with Joseph. They always use virgin means young woman, but young woman meant virgin. Just like toddler in our society means virgin, young woman of that time, if she's unmarried, it was synonymous with virgin. If you saw a young woman that's unmarried, that was synonymous with virgin.
Hold on, I got one question though, because didn't they get married at like 12? So a young woman would be 12 and still be a young woman, but didn't probably wasn't a virgin. So
It was
what they get married early at that
closer to
time?
14.
What she's saying is based on Jewish customs, right? So a young woman was expected to be a virgin because of the rules of the times back then. If you were unmarried, didn't have a husband, and you weren't and you were young, then you were expected to be a virgin. So
Right.
yes, young woman was synonymous with being a virgin because if
Okay,
you wasn't married, you wasn't supposed to be having sex.
Right. It was
so
unheard of.
let me make this point. I just want to make this point. In the original Hebrew for Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14, the writer could have used there is an actual word for virgin. I think it's Bethur, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the writer chose to use the word young woman. There are other parts of the Hebrew scriptures where they actually use the word, I think it's Bethur, and I think the masculine is Alma, which is referred to David at some point. So the word that was used originally was young woman, not virgin. The word virgin could have been used. The writer chose not to. And the reason why we have the word virgin is because when they translated to the Greek Septuagint, the translator chose to use the word. Um,
Spontaneous.
yeah. So that's how we got there. So and that's where Matthew picks up virgin and creates this whole narrative that's not in the original book Mark. Not to say that it's an impossibility, but I'm just saying. And then we get this birth narrative that's contradicting the birth narrative of Luke. In Matthew, the birth narrative um, basically has Joseph taking Jesus over into Egypt because Herod's gonna try to kill him, and then he comes back, and Herod's son Archelaus is reigning in the lower regions, so he decides to go to Nazareth. But then they're writing that to go along with the Bible prophecy that says that he would come out of Nazareth. So whoever's writing these stories, they're trying to match all of and a lot of and the reason you know that there's a problem is just like with Paul. A lot of the stories that they're writing, it's like where they say he's the only begotten, which is in Psalms chapter 2. In the original writing, had nothing to do with Jesus. It was talking about David. So you just have it. All of these writings that Matthew, the birth, the virgin, they're just making stuff. Some of this they're making up,
It's not made up.
and
Listen. So look, so with the whole virgin thing, right? Like I said, it's the understanding based on the customs at that time, right? So during that time, the rules were unmarried women were not to be having sex. If they were having sex, they would be being stoned, right? So if you are a young woman and unmarried, then you were considered a virgin. Period. No matter how you try to twist it because of your understanding now in 2025, back then a young woman unmarried would have been considered a virgin unless nobody knew that she was good at hiding that she was fucking niggas.
Well,
That's the whole point.
I
I
think
have a question
because he
though.
took. Wait a minute, I think because he took the Markian priority position, where he looks at Mark as the primary document and everything else is being built on top of Mark. Mark doesn't even include that narrative. So I think that's why he's taking the stance that, well, because I don't accept the virgin birth narrative either because it's not a part of the original documentation. Either when we look at the oldest
correct,
manuscripts, it's just not
correct.
there. So I think that's the position he's taking. So you need to more argue with that position than just the one mere point on what virgin could mean.
Can you guys hear me?
I just have a question though. Okay, so what if you're married? Would you be still considered a young woman if you're married at 14, 12, 13?
Yeah, you would still be considered a young woman.
All right. So what distinguishes a young woman from a virgin?
You would not be called a young woman
The
once
two
you
words.
marry. You would not be titled as a young woman anymore. You'd be titled as something else.
Right.
What would that title be?
A wife.
So let me just say this, right? When I went to Rome, in the Vatican, they have a picture on the wall, a painting, and this is why they have the army all around, is because they have Muhammad on a painting going to hell because he married a 9-year-old. So use that in your question, Monica. Ask them when the 9-year-old married Muhammad allegedly or whatever, was she considered a young woman, a virgin, or no longer a young woman, no longer a virgin? How
Well,
does that
she's a
work?
wife apparently. Like, she's a wife now at 19.
Hold on. So do you say,
But
does
she's
Muhammad
still a young
confirm
woman.
the Muslims?
No, they have a picture of Muhammad on at the in. Go ahead.
Inside the Vatican, he's in hell along with some other famous other religious
You talking
figures.
about like the Black Madonnas is what you're referring to, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So
So you're saying
But
the account
I'm
in
with
Luke is
James.
wrong because you said that, so I understand what James said about how you view Mark as you saying the account in Luke where Mary claimed that she was a virgin. That's not accurate.
Say that. I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
The accounts in Luke, right? You're saying that that's not accurate when Mary claimed that she was a virgin when she said she knew not a man.
No, she was a virgin. I'm not disputing that. That's a separate matter. I was just showing how the story, like James said, I was explaining how that story about Mary being a virgin came to be. Because in Mark, you don't have that story. Neither do you have the resurrection, right? And most Bible scholars agree that Mark tends to be the first one, and then Matthew and Luke. And some think it's, there's different positions on it, but I'm saying predominantly Mark. And so when Matthew is written later, um, he's writing from Mark. He's using it's. I think it's about 80% he uses a Mark. Other than he's using the Greek Septuagint. Like for instance, in the book of Luke, um, in chapter 4, when Jesus gets up and he's quoting from the scriptures, I think in Isaiah, he's obviously using. You could tell he's using the Greek Septuagint. Paul is using the Greek Septuagint. It's just a common thing. Most Bible scholars could agree to that. So the writer in Matthew, when he wrote this story about a virgin, it was inspired by a mistranslation. And as much as, and listen, I understand your position, but the original writer in Isaiah had a word that meant virgin that he could have put there, but he chose or she chose to use a word that means young woman. So it's not in the original Hebrew virgin when it was translated. It's kind of like what is Captain Cesariak when they in the Hebrew. I don't know how many of you guys are Hebrew Israelites or whatever, but he's saying it's kind of like the debate that Sinetta did with Apostle, where they're talking about the Gentile. In the Hebrew, the Gentile is singular. When God is talking, he's using the singular form to say the hey, the
Oh, you
Israelite.
mean God and
Other
God, and one of it's plural and the other one's singular. But let me ask you something: is Paul black or white?
He's doing away up to
what's that?
I said, was
he's
Paul
doing
black or
way
was
up.
he white?
Was Paul black
And
or
then my
white?
next question is: did he walk 50 years after God, after Jesus?
Um,
Your
well,
phone.
I get so
You're saying that was Paul black or white, and did he walk 50 years after Jesus?
Yeah, Paul's 50 years after God. He didn't walk with him.
So
What?
he's trying
Paul
to. Yeah, go ahead.
Paul and Jesus would have been on earth at the same time. If you go to the Vatican, Paul is a white bald head guy. That's the best I
Oh,
could
the
tell you.
Vatican got a white.
They have a model of Paul. He's a bald head white guy, and Peter is a long hair white guy. So that's about the best you're gonna
Yeah,
get.
bald head white guy.
Well,
But I want to get back to your virgin topic, right? So like in Isaiah, right? We I know we're using the translation as young woman, right, to gain our understanding. But when you
Hold on, real quick before you get into that. Nepal was going to say something about that Paul
no,
situation.
he's
oh,
fine.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Genesis. No, just
Oh,
I was just gonna say those are just Renaissance depictions. Those are all those white. They did an iconoclasm before that, destroyed a lot of original art pre-Renaissance, and then everybody was white after that. So you can't really go by the Vatican. So that's all I wanted to say.
yeah, I didn't want to lose that
Paul,
point, Hemi. No, but go ahead, Hemi. I'm sorry.
No, you're
Paul,
fine.
It's
I
a
didn't mean to
Paul
cut
and
off.
black
Jesus
pictures
was
are
the
in the
same
boat.
thing.
No, I was just saying that when we take young woman, like I said, in the context of the customs of their time, and then also Isaiah saying that this would be a sign, a young woman, a young woman giving birth during that time wouldn't be a sign. That wouldn't be a miraculous thing. You see what I'm saying? But a virgin given, that's why that understanding is there. You get what I'm saying?
It,
It's not just the fact that she's just, we're just saying, oh, young woman and the translation and different things like that. Is when you have the full context of what being said that you draw the conclusion that, okay, it's speaking of an actual virgin. Even in
well,
King Ahaz's time.
right. You know what? I'm sorry, man. I fell asleep at the wheel. I forgot
Apollo, if you want to debate,
that
nigga, come see me, nigga. Quit all that back chat bumping, nigga. If you really want smoke, let's set it up.
that
Sticky, why are you
that
disrupting this
that
man?
case in
No, no,
Isaiah
like, no,
chapter
don't do that, Silky.
Hemi.
I'm just making
Hey
fun of your
Hemi.
phone. We can't hear you. Go ahead. Go
In
ahead,
in
man.
Yo,
Isaiah chapter 7, I don't even know why I didn't think of this. When you go and you look at the context, that lady, the young woman that they're talking about, she actually in the next chapter, she's already pregnant. She's already conceived, and she goes on into the next chapter, and she has the baby. It has nothing to do with Jesus.
no,
Now,
but it does.
I
That's
know,
what. So that young woman was also a virgin. That's what I'm saying. And the young woman in King Ahaz's time was a virgin. That's why
she
it
was
was a sign.
she was pregnant. Listen, she was pregnant. Um, we could revisit this, but she's pregnant. The scripture indicates that she's pregnant, so she can't be a virgin. And she has the
That's a
baby.
sign,
She's pregnant as that's written. So if she's pregnant, she's no
right?
virgin at that
But she's
moment.
pregnant without sleeping with a man. That's the whole purpose of it being a sign.
And then
I'm
she
agreeing
has
with you.
okay, and then I'm sorry, it's bad connect. So she goes on to have the son in the next chapter, verse in chapter 15.
Facts, right?
So it's
Absolutely.
again, this story is not pointing to Jesus at all.
It it's
It's a
that's
stretch.
dual
It's a
prophecy.
that's where you're gonna lose me with dual prophecy. So
So we
I'll
don't
say
think that
I
the
have to.
Bible. If we can show, and I don't, like I said, I'm just, and I'm freestyling now because they just asked me to come up on your panel. I wish I could be more prepared and have this discussion with you.
Brother,
Like,
it's beautiful, man. Do what you
yeah,
do. I
yeah,
respect it.
but,
I just rock on, man. But
but
we
go
don't
ahead.
have to get into it so deeply here. I was just making
I
a
got you.
point about how Matthew came up with the
Mhm.
story. It's not in Mark, and as James had broken down kind of my concept on the matter. But
Right,
that's
right.
not listen, that's not the only case. And I'll be back up here next week with her, and I'll be sure to bring you various scriptures where it's kind of like in Psalm chapter 2, another case. I could hit you at least 10 times where they're taking stories from the Hebrew scriptures and they're trying to force it on to make Jesus the Messiah. And that's why the white Jews here in New York do not accept Jesus. And I know that's a hard concept because I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, right?
Hey,
But
sister.
Okay, so
in
look,
Psalm, go ahead.
no,
One
no, I
mic,
was saying,
guys. One
okay,
mic.
so I'm gonna jump off because I'm not, because and then later on. I'm Hemi, by the way. Nice to meet you,
No, no,
brother
no, no, no,
man.
no, no, bro.
And
No, Hemi, don't go nowhere.
li-
Don't go nowhere, bro. This is
no,
perfect for
because
you.
he's listen to what I'm,
Let's set up a
but we want to
conversation
have
about.
an in-depth. Listen to what I'm saying. We want to
Okay,
have
go
an
ahead, brother.
in-depth conversation. We want to have an in-depth conversation
All
about this
right, but
topic, right?
yeah, but
And I
let
want
me
to be
just
able
finish.
to listen. Just listen to what I'm saying. I want
Go ahead,
both
bro.
me and the brother to be prepared when we have the conversation. I don't want us to just be up here freestyle. I've been drinking tonight. I just came up here simply because you and Silky was tagging me in the chats. So I came up to introduce myself, give him my
Hemi, you
So,
saying
stance,
you
so,
want to
so,
set
and
up
we
a
so,
can continue.
dialogue with him?
so, hold up, bro. Just
You
before
want to
you
set up a
go,
little one-on-one with
Silky,
him?
Silky, hold up, bro. Just let me ask you a question before. I want to ask your brother a question. I ain't never met you. My name is JJ or Mandinka Mali. Are you saying that? Do you believe that Christ is the Messiah, or are you saying that he's made up? That's what I want to establish, because Kimmy actually believes in Christ as Messiah. So that's where I just want to know that, because I was informed that that's the type of debate you was looking for.
No, you have met him. He talked to Apostle. Like
Oh, this
not
is
Yeah,
even
saying. Oh,
I
okay, yeah,
debate.
yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah, he was.
debate with
Oh,
Apostle,
okay, yeah, he was on the platform. Okay, yeah, yeah.
but I never showed my face, so that's why you don't know who I am.
Okay, got you. So yeah, you ex Jehovah Witness, got you.
Yeah.
But so do you believe that Christ is the Messiah?
of course not.
You're talking about two different things.
Okay, go
Um,
ahead, brother.
and I just gave my position on the natural Jesus, right? And that's
Okay,
how we got to Isaiah because of Matthew. Matthew is making that story up. That's where I'm at with it. I'm not the. I mean, there's Bible scholars that fall into that same category, but that doesn't make it law. But when you look at, I already just broke that down. We're gonna
yeah,
probably disagree or whatever. Now, as far as the Messiah go, that gets tricky because depending on who you're talking to, that
hmm
Messiah comes with raising the dead, walking on water, turning water into
Water in the
wine,
wine,
feeding 5,000 the first time, 4,000 the second with five loaves and
healing the
two fishes.
blind.
We can go on and on. I'm
Mm.
saying you're gonna die on that hill because that part did not exist. And I stand with Jabari in one simple point that if you have a guy named Jesus, Josephus says that there's five, and one of them is
Mm.
saying, "Whoa." He's known for saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Matthew chapter 25. Woe to you, Pharisee. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, but then when I did the tour with Jabari at at the and also what's his name? Anyway, Reggie. But anyway, at the museum, there are so many stories that come out of Kemet that are also laid upon Jesus. So it's a conglomerate, but just sticking with Jesus, he could stem the guy in Mark, the Jesus in Mark could stem from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the righteous teacher. It seemed like they took they it's just like the black guys here in the United States, right? We have our
yeah,
whole history, and the white man came and took our history from us and rewrote it. And now
right.
we got Negroes online arguing about whether some of us were born here or came from Africa because we don't
That
know
part.
because what happened there. I'm saying something similar happened. That's all I'm saying.
All right, so if I can just quickly sum up kind of what I've been getting from what you're saying, you're pretty much saying that, yeah, you do believe there was an historical Jesus, but there were a lot of mythological and theological things heaped upon him that didn't really happen. Is that pretty much kind of a quick summary of what you've been saying?
Something triggered that notion, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just
Okay, and that's and
And it's
when I do
only
get a chance,
listen. It's only in Mark. I'm saying whatever you're gonna find about this Jesus character. If there, see here's the problem. I started off this whole show talking about his birth as a contradiction. I haven't heard one of you come after me for that. Everybody's been talking about the virgin deal, but where we started, no one has really counted that, right? I welcome it all. Okay,
what's that point
next week,
about his birth?
What's that?
What was that point? I just got on the call, so I'm
The
not really
point the
sure.
point I started off with was the birth of Jesus. Matthew and Luke, they contradict his birth by 10 years. I laid it out. Next time I'm coming up, I'm going to show you how. Now that's his birth. Okay, that's his passport. When it comes to his death, all of the Bible, the New Testament writers, they contradict his death. One has Mark says there's three women there, and then when you get to Luke, there's two, and then three, and then you go to it's just all over the place. Even as far as the angels, in one case, there's two angels there. When you really study the Bible, right, and you get into the book of Mark, Mark tells you that there's a man that's tearing his skin out in the field. Matthew says it's two. Matthew doubles all of the characters in the book of Mark. Why is this happening? There's two angels at the tomb instead of one. Um, there's just so many different discrepancies. Like where do you want to build? What part of your Jesus is real? That's what I want to know from you guys.
So,
Well,
so,
Part of him,
uh,
so
what
I'll
part of
say
him is
this.
true?
I'll say this, right? And we just know this based on how we live in today's society, right? Anytime, if this event can go on right now, and all of us can leave this call and tell the story of the events that happened on this live, and it'd be different accounts. Does that make it not true?
That's I have to be honest with you. You're speaking from indoctrination. So
That's
no,
not
I
indoctrination.
think
That's a
that's a
real
very
thing.
listen,
valid
I used
question.
to I used
That's a
to
real
sit in that
thing.
seat, so I can't knock you. Of course, there's going to be some discrepancies here or what have you, right? But we're
Uh-huh.
talking about. But I'm going to show you the next time around where Paul is deliberately changing scriptures, right? Most Bible scholars say that Matthew used Mark 80% to write his book. So if he's writing that book, why is he writing two for every account? Why did he write two guys in the storm, two blind guys,
I mean, with everything
two
at
angels?
the end
You
of the
see what I'm
day,
saying? That's
uh,
that's a little bit more, and he did it more than six times. That's
but
not
everything
just
at the
No,
end
but
of
But
the
like
he
I said,
but
also
hold
Paul.
on. Let me just say this real quick. Everything at the end of the day you say are very small things that I wouldn't even really like. I actually agree with Hemi that just because people tell stories and include different details within the story don't mean that the story ain't necessarily true. It just means there's different perspective being brought to the story. So with everything you're saying, you still believe that there is a historical Jesus, which I think is kind of the point of it all. So I mean, like, what is there really to argue with you about whether you believe what we believe happened involving this historical Jesus? I mean, I don't think that's really worth having. We really want to know if he's historical or not, and you've kind of agreed to that.
Well, they say
right.
Paul is real.
but
They claim
but
Paul like because Paul's he's in Greece, supposedly. But Paul also writes. Paul has scripture verses where he writes like he's with Jesus, and then he writes like he heard like he ain't with him. You know what I'm saying? One minute Jesus is right next to him and they kicking it, and the next minute he only telling the story about him like he don't know him.
Well, I think there's a difference between the way the people from Judea wrote and the way Paul wrote, and it has a lot to do with his Greek upbringing.
Hmm.
Paul used a lot of Greek thought in his writings, which wasn't very familiar to the Hebrew population. So that's why
You know
Peter
what?
comes along and says, hey, pretty much I'm a paraphrase that a lot of people who are unlearned wrestle with Paul's writings because it's not written in the same manner as the rest of the Bible is written by native Judeans
Because
who
he's
grew
writing
up
on
there.
both sides. Paul got beat up
Right.
but
everywhere he went, right? Everywhere he went,
Paul
he got
used a
attacked.
lot
They
of
tried to kill him. He
Paul
was doing
used
a
a
lot
lot
of
of pagan
treachery work,
writing
right?
style and stuff like that.
I mean, he literally
Like
quoted
Paul
a
was
lot
He
of
fighting all
pagan.
he
kind of
even
mess.
quoted that's what I
Yeah.
was about to say. He even
Paul
quoted
Paul didn't
pagan
even
writers.
Paul didn't even teach the same
Real
religion as Christ.
thing.
So I don't, and let me make a clarification, right? As far as what I'm saying, and I'm saying that there could have been a guy that triggered this whole concept about a Jesus. But if you're, I'm not delivering this Jesus the way you're um, accepting him as being the Messiah, raising the dead, walking on water, and all that. So as long as we have that clear, um, that's my position on it. But he could have
When is your
been.
next live, brother?
What's that?
When is the next time you going live?
Next Thursday at the same time.
That man said he
Okay.
ain't scared to be on the panel, dog. He said he ain't hard
Be
to get at.
quiet, bro. Okay, so next
Oh
Thursday,
no,
I'll
this
make
is a
sure I'm
five. This is
prepared.
gonna be a 5-part series. He's holding
Let's
back
get our
everything he knows.
let's get
No,
our stuff
absolutely.
together.
That's fine.
Let's get our stuff together. I don't like going all over the map with these
Facts.
discussions. So
Facts.
just let Monica know what we're going to talk about and
Okay.
or what you want to focus on. But I'm going to be talking about Jesus' death and all the discrepancies and so forth. And I know you guys are saying, "Oh, it's nothing," but it is. It's a lot of something when you have four distinctive writers and they're contradicting each other left and right.
But that's
What
the
about the
thing. You
dragons
just
in the
admitted that
Bible?
it's four distinct writers, bro.
Paul
Like,
and
and
Paul
I, and
and
I,
Paul has a whole different religion, by the way. So, and I don't know if you were here when I gave the example about the rich man and how he says, "Hey, you know what I have to do to get everlasting life, or whatever it is," and Jesus told him to keep the commandments or what have you. If he had to ask Paul that same question 20 years later, what would Paul have said? Anybody can
I'm
answer.
finna, sign- I'm finna sign off, y'all. I'll see you next Thursday, brother.
Well,
Brother Mayor.
Paul was
I'm gonna hit
crooked and then he
Monica up in the
turned
back
good,
chat.
right? Ain't that the story of
I
Paul?
mean, I wouldn't
Hey,
want to.
He
Monica.
started believing in the faith and then he started going like God protected him supposedly, quote unquote.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that Paul preached a different religion. Again, this is going to be a matter of perception of what you want to argue versus what others. I just believe he used a different, framework for framing
What
his
did Paul?
arguments, which is Greek,
What
which was
did
the Greek
Jesus? Okay,
philosophers.
let me come at you, Matthew. Right, the Sermon on the Mount. What did Jesus say about changing one tittle, one jot of the law? What did he say about people when a man would come to you and trying to teach you something different? What did Jesus say about what that? What are you supposed to do about that man that's telling
What
you don't have to keep the law?
Well, the law tells us that if a man tells you to go after another god or not to keep the law, that you should stone him. And Jesus does tell him not to change one jot nor tittle of the law. And I
Okay,
don't think that.
so
Oh, let me just say one more thing. And I don't think that that's what was done by Paul.
okay,
Paul
so I would have to hear your argument.
Paul often advocated using grace to go outside of the law in order to bring other people back in. He often used that. He often spoke of two different laws, right? He spoke of the law of the flesh, and he spoke of the law of God, which was the one he talked about being the good law that told him the difference between what was right and wrong. But then he talked about he had another law in his flesh, so that's carnal law. He also
Aren't we all supposed to die in like some burning flame? Ain't we supposed to be cursed in fire or something like that?
cursed in fire. I
Yeah,
mean,
the last where's the last things that's how we supposed to
I
go,
mean
right? We supposed to burn in the flame.
the enemies of God, I would say, yeah, according to the book.
And then you got stoning. You know what I'm saying? You gotta obey your master. This is
Oh,
a few
obey your
things in
wait a
that
minute.
book.
What does obey your master? Obey your master don't mean
Well, the one where
slave
it says you're
master.
supposed to love your master and obey your master as
But
if
it
your
don't mean
master is God.
it don't mean slave master. You have to know the culture and the laws around the culture before you just
It say
you
the
can't
master
wait, hold
and
on.
the
Hey,
God. It say
I
obey
mean
your master
hey,
as
you
if
gotta
your
let people
master is
finish
God.
talking. You gotta
Hey,
let people
listen,
finish
Go,
what they
listen.
saying.
all right, go
All
ahead.
right, Silky, talk to yourself then. Silky, go ahead.
Go ahead, James, because we're about to like wrap this up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
put you
muted
up
my mic.
here.
Okay. Um all I was gonna say real quick is that when we're talking about these things, we're not necessarily I'm gonna go to the whole conversation since we're gonna round it all up. I don't see those things that you're calling discrepancies as real discrepancies. I kind of agree with Hemi, where his standpoint is that if four different people telling the story, they're gonna highlight different things. You know, I might, because I'm a shoe head or something, I might walk into a room, and when I'm telling the story, I might talk about every pair of shoes that's in the room, while Silky may come into the room and never mention anything about shoes at all. You know what I mean? He might say, "Hey, I like blah 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 shirt." You know, it's just different details that different people are gonna highlight due to
You're
their
not
nature.
supposed to add to the scripture, right?
But that's not adding
You're
to it
not
if you
supposed to
just
add or take away.
your testimony is not adding to anything. You give, that's what we're talking about, the testaments, the four gospels. That's a testimony. That's not adding anything. Now, if you want to go to Paul, I don't think Paul added anything. He advocated, like I said again, for the use of grace a lot in order to go outside of the law to bring people back in to serve the law. And he spoke of many different laws.
Okay, so
So we,
let me
mhm.
ask you a question. When it comes to the gospel writers, how many of them were eyewitnesses to Jesus?
uh, gospel,
Sat with
right?
him, ate.
John, I think everyone else may have been second generation who wrote. Matthew, John and Matthew, I believe. That's it.
Hmm. Okay.
And some people argue that, I agree with you based on the evidence that Mark is the oldest. But some people do argue that there was an original Hebrew version of Matthew that we don't have any manuscripts of. But based
So
on the way that it's written and translated, it seems that it may have been originally written in Hebrew.
so I want to appeal to your stance, right? So you're saying that these individuals are second-handed. I disagree about John and Matthew. According to I stand with most Bible scholars that these are um, all traditions being written down or made up and written down. Um, but you're saying that, well, maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was the other guy. I don't know. I'm sorry, but you're saying that we're remembering these things differently. Like tonight, tomorrow we're going to all write some a little bit different about what each one said. But you're saying that about men who weren't even there in the first place. How do you remember something wrong to write down that you didn't even witness? You heard about it, which was passed on by so many
Um,
different word of mouth. How does that work in real life?
I mean, it works all the time in ancient history. Most ancient history is based on oral tradition. And when we're talking,
He's
we're not
referring to
talking.
a real eyewitness.
We
Is what
understand. I understand, Silky, but I'm answering his question. I'm not. I don't need you to interrupt me. Anyway, when we talk about the ancient world, most of that is built on oral tradition, and they didn't keep stories the same way we keep stories. Like that, a lot of their stories came in rhyme schemes, and even as us as people, we understand and remember rhyme schemes way better. We evolved to remember rhyme schemes and things like that. So that's why we make songs out of education for children so they remember it easy. That's why it's easy to pick up on a catchy part of a song, even though it's the first time you heard it, you remember every single word of it. So these types of traditions was kept that way. Plus, when you have stories that are going around, I don't have an issue with anyone saying, hey, some people may have, overemphasized a point or two in there. I don't have an issue with that, me per se, because I understand how history works and I look at these as historical accounts being written down by these people. So again, when we talk about people like Alexander the Great, we don't have people talking about him until 200-300 years after he was, dead. But no one really argues whether he's a historical person. No one really argues and gripes about, different details that other people may say about it, because this happens all the time in ancient history. Some people may
they got
report.
real artifacts, right?
Hold
So
on, hold
so
on.
just hold on. So based on what you just said, it's kind of like in the book of Luke,
This is
at
what I
the
want to
end.
do, and what I want to do real quick though, Silky. Listen, I wanna do a thing with James Winter and Mel real quick because they're all Hebrew Israelites, and then I want to bring you on one like when he, because I think that I want you to like watch this whole thing, and then when he comes back on, I want you to be ready to like really discuss some of the Bible stuff that he's talking about, because you're kind of bringing in like the other stuff that we ain't prepared to like talk about. That we had a really specific thing, and I really want to get into like the scripture stuff. Or what you think, Silky? You have, do you know?
Yeah, yeah, y'all good. Y'all can stay in the Bible.
Okay, then we'll probably, but later on though, because this is gonna be like a long like series that we're gonna, not as long, but it's gonna be over time, and I want you to watch it, and then we can bring up the other stuff, because I thought that he was gonna get into those like Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff, but we'll get into that later on. So I want to like have Winter, James, and then Mel like just continue this conversation. All right, so shouts out. Thank you, Silky.
Wait. I just came back in because I didn't even look at the chat and it said don't leave. And I just came back and saw you said that.
No, I wanted you to get into like some other stuff, but I wanted you to see certain stuff that he was going on in this conversation, but from a scriptural standpoint, because I don't know, but I know they're getting deep, and I wanted to like really get deep about it. So I'm gonna get off here, and y'all.
Okay. I just came back because I saw you said don't leave. That Mary was always pregnant. Is that what she said? Now she left, but is that what you said, Genesis? I know
Well,
you still.
it's more like that she was already, she had been pregnant before, or something like that. Mel, could you go into like Mary, that she was
Yeah,
already.
let me hear. Let me
It
listen.
wasn't Mary. It was the young woman in Isaiah chapter 7. She's already pregnant. She's already conceived, and she has the baby in the next chapter. That's what they're referring to. We talked about that like an hour ago.
Okay, you're talking about Isaiah's wife, or
Yeah.
Um,
okay, I'm confused. So that's not. We're not talking about Mary at all. That's what Jen. I'm just going by what I saw in the
No, I think
chat.
Mel froze. He froze. He's frozen.
Yeah, no, he's discussing the prophecy. Well, the prophet Isaiah. Prophecies are always more.
Yeah, I think there was like also something that really when it brought when he broke it down, it was showing like the inconsistencies of like that whole like thing, but he froze up. So let's see if he'll be able to come back.
Well, I don't know what the gentleman's name is with the blue and the boxing red
Oh,
block.
that's James Cassell.
Okay, so Mel said you guys already discussed this. I'm sorry, I left and came back.
Oh no,
But
that's cool. James, could you like kind of review some of the stuff that y'all been talking about? He gonna come back. He'll be back.
Okay, well, he was just kind of briefly breaking down to us that he do pretty much believe that there is a historical Jesus, but he
right.
believes that there's a lot of discrepancies around his birth, around his death, around I don't think he necessarily believes that the resurrection was original part of the story. He doesn't believe the virgin birth was original part of the story. So he's pretty much telling us that he believed a lot of mythology was forced on him, that a lot of the writings after Mark were forcing his life to meet certain prophecies and things like that. So that's kind of what he was just kind of pushing out to us, that, yeah, I believe he existed, but I don't believe nothing else really too much about the story. I believe there's a lot of conflicts. I believe he was just a regular guy that people added a bunch of stuff from a bunch of other people onto him, even grabbed some Greek mythology, I mean, not some Greek, some Egyptian stories and put it onto him in order to make him, this great figure.
Yes, and I did pick that up from him as well. Thank you. I specifically when he said we already discussed that. I apologize that I missed it, but what was the topic? I mean, what not the topic? What did Genesis even? Where did she get Mary? The Mary of the Gospels being pregnant all the time.
I think that what may have happened was because of the conversation that Hemi and the presenter was having at the time, that they were jumping back and forth from the Gospels into Isaiah And I think she may have thought that when he was speaking about Isaiah, that he was talking about Mary at that point, and asked you to come and give your take on that, because she probably figured you would have been opposed to it. But he wasn't talking about Mary. He was talking about, I believe that was Isaiah's wife.
Right.
That was
Okay.
in that prophecy. Yeah.
Okay, great. And you know what,
So,
too, Mel?
was that, and so is that true? Was it the whole thing about Mary? So I thought that when you're talking about like the woman being the virgin, so I thought that you were trying to draw a parallel in the stories about how these books will be saying one thing, and it's really talking about the same person in different times or whatever. So am I wrong about that? Like, Mel,
Yeah, they were trying to say it was in a figurative sense and so forth. Well, that's the problem when we have these type of discussions. It's like it, we need to stay like on a very base level.
Okay, so but you
I'm
were,
sorry,
what was
your mic just went out. Were you saying something else, Mel?
at a base level? It didn't go out. But Mel, I've heard this is not an unpopular point where people who are not messianic, or even who don't agree with the virgin birth, they will point out that, look, Isaiah's wife was pregnant. And, so those parallels that are often drawn from, I think it's Isaiah 53, I'm not sure, so don't quote me. But the parallels that are drawn between the gospel with the virgin birth and speaking about her having a baby without copulation, and then that particular story in Isaiah, people like me who say, okay, according to the text, there is a virgin birth. We use that, and then there will be people who counter it and come in and say, no, because Isaiah's wife wasn't a virgin, and this is about her having a baby. Am I getting even more confusing, basically, or no? James Cassell, is it James Cassell?
Yeah, it's fine. You can just call me James. That's fine. But nah, I think that you kind of hitting the nail on the head, because I myself, I'm kind of I'll say I'm on the fence with the whole virgin birth thing, because I know a lot of the earlier manuscripts, if you look at like the Aramaic Peshitta, it's not in there. So I am on the wall about that, but I do know at least one early church father in Tertullian who does defend the concept of it being a literal virgin birth, not just the idea of, it being a young woman. But to me, it's like, hey, I mean, that's a theological debate that's been going on since I'd say the first, second century. I still say, hey, you're still showing that they're at least debating about this actual historical person, in my view. I mean, I believe that's what the topic, more or less, is he an historical person? I think he's saying, yeah, but he has his questions around the mythos around it, while we as believers will accept that mythos.
Mel, and also there was Mel, you about to say something, but he also discussed about the fact that there was like, you have one author saying it was one angel, and then another author doubling it up. Oh, it was two angels, three angels, whatever. So that's the part that you missed on the pod.
What author? What you're talking about? The gospel?
Yeah, I'm talking about the gospel. So here, let me just tell you real quick. In the book of Mark, it gives basically the baseline stories. And Nepal, I wanted to hear what you were saying when I said something about having base level conversations for these type of engagements, so we don't confuse the audience.
I
What
agree
were you
with you.
saying?
I think we need to have our be when we sit down with these conversations, we need to know we're not talking theologically. We're talking about historical Jesus, and that's more of a conversation where I'm 100% with you on the
Yeah.
examination of it and pointing out the discrepancies. I've never said no about that. And what I come away with, though, is, I know you said Bart Ehrman doesn't, but on the record he does, and a few other scholars, is okay, there definitely was this historical Jesus. The miracles, obviously, I agree with you that we can see similarities in all these different religions, these different, like I said, Hinduism, Kemetic religion, Sumerian, it goes on and on. So yes, I think it's a very, very, it's a longer conversation. It's a deeper conversation. What I don't, I could say appreciate is when somebody unlike you comes in super rigid and almost like they're religious and say, oh, you're so stupid. Jesus never existed. And let me show you why. It's still an ongoing conversation, right? So I could sit with somebody like you and keep on talking and you present stuff and I go, okay, you know what? That's true. Oh, wait, I don't. And then you present something else and I say, well, no, Mel, because I want to show you this. And then you look at what I have and we just keep going where you
Right.
still are in your same position saying, nah, he's definitely not the Messiah on a theological side, right? But then you're like, I'm on the fence of who this guy really was. With me, I'm like, yeah, this definitely was the Messiah. And so now I'm starting to conflate. You get what I'm saying? So I'm saying I rock with you on the conversation as it goes. Just like Jabari. In fact, you're way when I had the debate with Jabari and the other brothers, we had the debate. Jabari has come to the conclusion that absolutely, he's closed, jury's in for him, right? And I'm going to hand it over to you and ask you, is the jury in on historical Jesus, not theological? Just for the record, for you, is the jury in? Is the verdict, yes, he existed, or are you still deliberating?
Based on the book of Mark, um, I think it's the closest you're going to get to a pure form of some sort of Jesus, right? Now, what inspired the book? It seems to be if if we just focus. How about we just the next time we'll come on maybe or one of these shows, we're just going to focus on Mark, and we're going to see and dig into it to see, is this guy really saying he's the Messiah? Is he saying he's God? You know, because when you really look into the book of Mark, you don't find a lot of the embellished stories. That's my whole point that you get with Matthew, like I went over earlier today. Even the resurrection story. Look at Matthew in the final chapter when it says the temple, the curtain in the temple rent in two, and it says the dead bodies came up out of the ground and ran into the city for all the people saw this. Like, that's insanity. Like, who would believe that that happened? So um if you're going to believe that, or if that's a problem for you, then where are you going to stop with your problems? It's like when you have a banana that has a rotten spot, like, or contamination. How far do you, what's good and what's bad? At some point it gets a little sketchy. There's a lot of things in the gospels that are simply just made up, or it's insanity, like that story about if you want to call them mummies coming up out of the ground. Like, that's like, do you really want to stand behind that?
Well, I want to add to that. We got to remember at the time we don't even have to go to ancient. We don't have to go to like 33 BC or AD. I should say BC. I always mess this up. CE. Excuse me. CE. Damn. I miss saying AD. Get it? So we don't have to go to 33 AD/CE. We can go back to like even the 1500s, where there was a bell set above the ground and people rang it, with the little string that went down to when they were buried. And people, it was a common thing to ring the bell and be like, oh, well, they weren't dead. Before it was a thing to just always embalm people. And then we have tombs rather than people being, graves being dug and people put in the ground. So when we start looking at it that way, it doesn't seem so far-fetched that people, I'm not even talking about that event. It's not far-fetched that those kinds of things took place. You know what I'm saying? That people actually were like banging on the door of the cave or whatever, or the tomb, like, let me out. Hey, y'all thought I was dead. I was just in a coma or whatever. So once we put it in that perspective, which is logical, then we can say, okay, then it's not like a Thriller video for, Michael Jackson. It was more like the advances of science weren't that advanced to know, okay, this person is definitely dead.
Don't they do that in Haiti right
So
now?
hold
Don't
on.
they like bury people? And no, I'm sorry.
With the bell, yes. Hmm.
So check this out, right? And I want you to envision Michael Jackson Thriller. Matthew chapter 27 and verse 51. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many.
Okay, yeah, that's
Not
possible.
Michael Jackson Thriller though. He said, imagine
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
because
but
Michael
because
Jackson.
yeah, they were. It says the graves were open. They were not all. At that time, it wasn't customary to bury someone in the ground. It was, from what we can read in the text, it wasn't uncommon to put someone in a tomb. So, with that understood, I'm not even validating. Okay. Now this isn't about my belief. I'm not even validating the text so much as saying, could that have been a possible occurrence? That someone could be laid in a tomb, thought to be dead, and they're not, right? They could be in a coma. They could be just unconscious.
Bruh,
So, yeah.
we so serious. We missing how hilarious when you think about Thriller and when he read that. I pictured it. I don't know where y'all was at, but I pictured. He said, "Put your mind." Michael Jackson Thriller. He read that. Come on, y'all. Y'all can't. Y'all too serious. Y'all need to like. Come on, though. That
and,
sounded crazy.
and I will say that Flagon of Tralles in the 2nd century, and he was quoted by Origin, did say that there was an earthquake around the time of his death and an unusual darkness. Now
Yes.
I don't know about people claiming that they seen prophets arisen, but we do have claims that are accepted by scholars that people did claim to see an arisen Christ. They did say that there were mass uh, groups that claimed and believed they had seen a risen Christ, and it, group hallucination isn't something that takes place. I mean, that's not something that people believe take place. So it would have to be, the best explanation for all this would be pretty much that there was something going on during that time period, something that is supernaturally recorded by not just Christians, even Romans, that happened around and during that time period. So I
Wait,
mean,
wait, 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 wait. You I would need you when we meet again. You would have to source that up because
okay,
it's getting
that's
a
a bit.
little it's a little murky that I find that hard to believe. But you might have some information that I don't have. So I'm it's all love. I'm just saying I would like to if you're saying all this has happened, I would want to see the source of it.
Well,
Okay.
I can
Now the
just
other thing
go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to answer your question. So in the book of Mark, you have a story about the crazy man on the hill, cutting him. I'm speaking loosely, cutting himself with stones. He's demon possessed, right? And he has legions inside of him. In the book of Matthew, it says it's two men. And in the book of Mark and also Luke again, you have a blind man. In the book of Matthew, it's two blind men. In in Mark chapter 11, it talks about you have the colt. In the book of Matthew, you have a donkey and a colt. And Jesus puts the clothing over the blanket over both of them. So again, you have two. At the grave site, instead of in Mark, you have one angel. In Matthew, you have two. So Matthew is adding, there's about 9 cases where Matthew is adding two. So if he's writing 80% of Mark, why is he adding two? Like he's copying some of the scriptures. I could show you. He's writing word for word. I mean,
What
up to
those are simple.
38 words. You know, same
And
word,
lots of
same word.
But
non-factual.
those are simple numerical discrepancies. I don't see it. That doesn't change anything from the nature of the story. The story is about
You
he
you
did a
would
ministry. Let me just finish.
go
He had
ahead.
a ministry, which I mean, many people accept that not even just Jesus, that there were many people who had ministries where they cured people who or claimed to cure people who were demon possessed, did miracle workers and things like that. Just like we have people running around claiming to do that today. It's been going on since the ancient world, and this is just them saying that he is one of the people that were going around doing that. When you talk about the angels being at the grave, this is them validating his being risen from the grave and it being a thing done by God. So they're saying, hey, the angels are here. These angels symbolize God, messengers of God. This is an act of God. That is what they're conveying. And I just want to highlight something the sister was saying earlier when she was talking about how you find different religions. Yeah, they're called motifs, right? These are universal motifs that's found in every religion that we will find around the world because we as humans, we evolve to recognize and adhere to these universal motifs that's been characteristics of human existence since humanity has existed.
So we had Laurel Burns that just joined real quick. I think they want to say something. We're gonna start wrapping this up and give like final thoughts because we have a. This is not the first. This is not the last. This is gonna be. Well, this is the first. Is not the last, and we're gonna really get into this. Like we're gonna go come back on next Thursday and continue to discuss this. What's up, Laurel? How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, sis?
Hey, go ahead.
I was just chiming in, man, because you know what I'm saying, trying to help support, you know what I'm saying, the channel and whatnot. And I was just listening. It sounded like it was a good conversation. I'm sorry I came at the end of it.
Well, shouts out. Thank you. Make sure you like and subscribe. Anyone in the chat, make sure y'all like and
Wait a minute.
subscribe.
What was the guy's name?
Laurel Burns.
Laurel. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for coming up. Thank you for giving us the support.
Thanks
Please
for
like and
coming up.
subscribe. Please hit your notifications because we're gonna be back here on Thursday and we're gonna continue this conversation. It's gonna get really deep. We're gonna really continue to dig into this. Really, he holding back, y'all. He ain't really telling y'all everything he fixing to like uncover. This is just the beginning. So uh we're at 217 in. I want to get like thoughts from everybody and then get some final thoughts from Mel. And listen, we're gonna be back here on next Thursday to continue this conversation. So let's start with Laurel. Let's go ahead.
Hey, yes, yeah, man. This Laurel Burns, man, Naga World Order representative, man. Again, I came in at the end. It sounded like I was having a great conversation. Uh, and it sounded like y'all were discussing whether if the writers were authentic or were they were plagiarizing other authors of the book. And I thought that was common knowledge, but I guess it's not. So yeah, man. You say next Thursday?
Yeah, we're gonna continue to dive deep. This is the first one. Next Thursday, we're gonna get even deeper. He's gonna go into Paul, right? Would you say was it Paul? We're
No,
gonna
Uh,
go into
we're going to talk about the
Sister
discrepancies of
Monica,
the text.
Honey said you ducking that smoke. She trying to set up a debate with you.
right. Well, we'll talk about that afterwards. I'm gonna focus on this right now, and
All
I'll
right, all right.
after that. But yeah, listen, so thank you for coming. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let's go to the next person. So go ahead. What you had something to say, Mel, real quick, just before that?
Um, no, I was going to touch on what James said.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say you're well spoken, but you're heavy on the faith, so it's kind of hard. I respect that because I'm a man having a lot of background similar, so it's hard for me to really, I understand your position, so I can't really
Tell me this,
You're
Mel. Do
you're
you
not a
feel like,
person I want to debate, huh? What's that?
do you feel to a certain extent that you don't want to take away a person's faith? You've been there before, and you don't want to be the one to like kind of like break the bad news about what's going on. So you feel very what's like measured in what you say. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the more it's the more you learn in life, the more you realize, the more you don't know. And you know, when I heard James talking about Paul, and he don't know yet that Paul is similar to the Antichrist, it bothers me because I'm like, there's a high probability that there's a pastor somewhere digging in his pockets. You know what I mean?
Right.
I feel
So
I
listen.
feel
So
like
if
you
we're
I feel like you snowed in, but these type of discussions, and I'm not saying that I have it. I know what I don't know Nepal, but I know I've been following for years, so I know how she's roll, and I know we could go at it or whatever. But as far as James, though, I wouldn't want to debate you in any way. I respect what you're saying. The only thing I would say is just keep studying. Because I used to be in a zone where I thought I knew it, really knew the Bible. I was sharp, and then I started to realize, wait a minute, I don't know anything about it. So that's why I started the journey of learning, from on a different kind of level. And it was heartbreaking for me because I spent my best years I gave to religion. I went to the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was there. I volunteered 48 hours a week working for 10 long years. The best years of my life when I was from 19, into my early 30s. I gave all in the name of God, only to find out that it's it requires some research, brother. That's all I can tell you.
and real quick,
So
I wanted
I'll
to
leave it
really
at that.
real quick.
I
I wanted to
wish
also,
somebody had freed me a long time ago. I would be so much better now. But
but
anyway, go
I
ahead.
want to go into this real quick. Now, you said that you signed an oath, right? You said you signed what is it called? Like an oath of charity. What is it called? The oath of
It's somewhere here on my desk. It's a vow of poverty, and I signed over my life so that if I died, they would control my body. Any income that I would make during those 10 years, I'd have to turn it over to the order. I have to follow the order, and I can't be disobedient to the order. It's all on my channel, Watching the World. I go over all that stuff. But all of that is done under the guise of religion. It has nothing to do with the God. When pastor is telling you he needs your money, if he really sat down, and as James keeps saying, you know, uh, the understanding back then if that's the case and pastor would do that, then he would stop. He wouldn't have a basis to take people's money. But see, these are all the things that you just don't get when you like. There were years that when I was deep into the Jehovah Witness, if you told me Jesus, Matthew and Luke, they contradict Jesus' birth, man, I would have thought you were the devil and said, "Get away from me." I'd start feeling weird inside. You know what I mean? Because you're talking about my Jesus. So I get it, but you just have to keep researching and a lot of times I hear kickback, but I know that if we keep these discussions and you really open up your mind, that's why I said in the beginning, you got to open up your mind a little bit because you want to know. Like, there's a lot of things, like, brother, I don't care what time frame, slavery is slavery. And then you have these guys on the internet trying to say, well, yeah, in Deuteronomy, it wasn't, your slave, you were protected by your master. No, he was beating your ass. That's what was happening. And it's sanctioned in the Bible. Any way you want to slice it, I'll sit with you. But it's a problem. Even if you try to make it all seem well about this whole grape issue in the Bible. Jehovah's Witnesses, when you go through the Bible at their meetings, they skip those chapters. Like, I would have never known unless I sat and, because they're just constantly feeding your mind. And that's what happens in church, or your
really get
grandmother
into.
is good for it.
Go
See what I'm
ahead.
saying? So
I
that's
wanted to
all.
like get into that vow of the vow, the oath that you took. that also exists in Rome, and that's why you felt a thing to really go to Rome and really find out.
What do you mean by, yeah, that's what she had mentioned. What do you mean by exist in Rome? I was wondering that. I'm glad you reminded me. Can you hear me? Oh damn, nobody can hear me.
You there?
Nah, I hear you. I hear you.
Are you asking me, or I mean,
Yeah,
who's it?
you said that you took the same oath that like the
Oh,
Pope
okay, yeah. Sorry,
in
sorry.
Rome.
So here's the deal. Okay, um, you ever hear about? So Jehovah's Witnesses have a big problem right now with child sex abuse, and then I shouldn't say that on YouTube. I'm sorry. Um, I'll say SA from here on. But in Pennsylvania, like, how do you get in one congregation or what have you? You get maybe 7 or 8 guys that are messing with underage kids. Like, are they in cahoots? Are they having private meetings? Well, this same problem exists within the Catholic Church, and that's where we probably heard about it first. And then 3 years ago, it started hitting the South Circuit with the Baptist ministers, and even it has touched the tentacles of T.D. Jakes. But you won't hear about a lot of this. But in the order, the Catholic order, when you sign that religious order, no matter what
Back
you
up a little bit
do,
because it hold on, I'm sorry. Back up a little bit because every 5 minutes it's like cutting out a little bit. But go ahead, reverse about the religious order thing.
we're having a snowstorm, so I'm struggling over here to keep
I can
alive.
hear you.
Um, okay,
It's not breaking up on our end.
so in the Catholic order, they sign a vow of poverty just like I pretty much signed, and it's obviously all this stuff come from Rome, and that's why what I learned when I went to Rome, most people don't believe in God. That's what I found. I interviewed like 138 people, and
You
they
mean
were
on the
like,
street or you're talking about at the Vatican?
in both. I did a lot of video footage of people that actually work at the Vatican. They look at us as like, we're in awe, and they're like, you really need to know the truth, right?
So
But I
you're going
mean,
to have to show me who at the Vatican said God doesn't exist.
right.
Because I grew up devout Catholic. My brother is in some Catholic orders. He is actually initiated as a Knight of Malta. My sister works with Jesuits. There's no one at the Vatican that would ever say God does not exist, especially not to someone just who is a random civilian.
Okay. I have footage. I took a lot of footage, so I could show you some stuff. So
Yeah, I would like to see what
I'll be
person.
sure to share.
No,
I'll
not to
share
interrupt
that.
you, but the thing that because Genesis said, you got to be clear. No one at the Vatican who is actually ordained and taken on a vow of poverty would say God doesn't exist.
No,
Well,
no, that's not.
the elite at the
That's not.
Vatican
Wait,
know
wait,
that
wait.
knows that God is light. You know what I'm saying? And so they know that God is light, and what the masses is doing is idol worshiping the image of man, and they know that. That's
Yeah,
why
they.
a lot of them aren't actual. That's why a lot of them don't actually believe in God per se, as far as like the book God goes.
Yeah, for instance, one of the people that I have on video, she was saying how Murray is Mars. So to me, when I started hearing that type of stuff, that's not your. What I'm saying is not your
Was she a
regular run of
nun?
the mill.
Was she a
What's
nun?
that?
Was she a nun?
She said that Murray
No,
came
but was
from.
she a nun?
I don't know. She worked. I don't. She worked at the Vatican. I interviewed people that
Or
worked
was
at the
she
Vatican.
punching tickets at the door? I mean, I'm being serious. Like, was she a tour guide? I get what you're
Um,
saying, and I'm not mocking you, but the point is like there's a known fact across the board that there is they believe in God. Whatever God they're worshiping, that could be debated.
Because
But
the Catholicism is a solar code. It's literally a solar code. I mean, they're literally worshiping natural phenomenon under the anthropomorphism of God being a man or a person. God's not a person. It's not this person. God is light. It's the fabric of space and time and all that other shit. You see what I'm saying? So like people just don't understand that they are actually idol worshiping. If your God got pronouns, you're idol worshiping. It's that simple.
And I'm not saying, thank you. I'm not saying, Mel, that you're lying about these people, but I'm wondering who are the people that you talked to that said God did. You know, in Rome, which I've been there many times, there's actually a prison where they say Paul stayed, where Paul was imprisoned. So Paul in Rome, you can go to Rome, and right there, you can go down to that dungeon in that whatever, it's like a monument, so to speak. You can see, they say, in the center of Rome, this is where Paul was imprisoned. So if they're saying Paul was imprisoned there, obviously they're not saying that Jesus didn't exist and that God doesn't exist. I'm not saying that you're lying. I believe that you did interview people, but who are these people? Random like partiers? And I'm not trying to be funny, because just if you go to Israel, it's a bunch of people, LGBTQ, eating ham sandwiches. They'll be like, what's up? Let's have fun. But they might say, even in the center of Israel, there's no God, there's no Torah, but you know that land, that is the land of the Torah and the land of the Israelites. So I'm just, you know what I mean? I don't want to sound like I'm just like, you're lying. I'm making clear that I'm not saying you're lying. But who are these people you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the people that I interviewed. I mean, I interviewed a lot of people, so you know, I was getting a lot of strange answers, like Murray came from Mars and Venus and this and all this other weird stuff that's not orthodox to Christianity. Or I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the Catholics, but
That's Gnosticism, man.
What's that?
That's Gnosticism. What they telling you? That's all Gnosticism and Kabbalah and stuff like that, man. Like that's mysticism. What they talking about?
Right. To be specific, it's
but
mystic. It's astrotheology. When people start talking about Mars, and it is, and it is true though. I'll say this, Mel. All religion is linked back to astrotheology, but that's an entirely different conversation. So let me mute out.
So that's the type of answers I was getting. So that's not the traditional Christian way of thinking.
Well, and that's why I said, like, again, that's because God is light and light is electromagnetism. If you really want to understand the nature of God, you have to study electromagnetism in all of its forms, all of its different forms. And you know, like if you're actually looking for God, searching for God, then you're gonna be looking for the attributes of God. You have to ignore the ones that are rooted in human morality, because that's human shit, that's human imposing themselves on the concept of God. When you talk about God, you're talking about pure energy. You're talking about the thing that animates all things. The thing, you know what I'm saying? What do you share in common with all things? Because whatever that thing is, that's what God is. That's the essence of God. You see what I'm saying? That thing, that essence of God is in all places at all times. You see what I'm saying?
But where does that fit into Christianity and the belief in Jesus Christ? So if you go into the Roman Catholic Church, where everything is about Jesus and the birth, and he's the Messiah, where does Mars come into play? Now you do have people that will say, hey, you know, the Bible is really a
You stop talking, sis. You just cut out.
This goes back to what you were saying, Mel. We didn't hear you. Go ahead, Genesis.
Okay, you didn't hear anything I said?
You broke. No, you cut out. So you might as well just say it all over. We didn't.
Right. So I was saying is that, okay, so this is a place of Christianity. And so really about like that whole thing that he's saying, well, about God being about energy and this, that, the other, that's not a part of Christianity. God is like.
Yeah, you cut out again.
But Mel, it goes back to what you were saying about the Counts of Nicaea, where they merged the pagan. I'm sorry, you came back in.
The Bible is so-called a book of astrology and this, that, the other, and astronomy, and that Jesus is really about the Pisces and this, that, the other. So he's just confirming that when he went to the Vatican.
Wow, you're breaking up. But yeah, but my issue was like them saying God doesn't exist. Maybe I jumped the gun. because they all
Sounds like
believe
to
in
me is that
God.
he found okay. Yeah.
So Mel, in your defense, because you are very graceful and polite, and I don't want to seem like a brute force coming in here. Let me state what I said. Or let me just approach it this way. When you talk to those people, it wasn't that they didn't believe in God, but they didn't believe in God of the Bible. Is that what you're saying?
Right. They didn't believe the traditional Christian way, is what I'm saying. Because, and I think this is what I walked away from, because everybody seemed to, Mary was such a big deal. And like, I didn't come from that school of thought. So I'm not versed on Catholics. Okay. But they always tied it to some sort of planet, or it was just, people. I'm talking about the regular people there and some of my tour guides. I was questioning a lot of people, and I didn't get the kind of it wasn't Christ centered at all.
Yeah, that's because
So that's
the
not
concept of God literally comes from observing the sun. Like literally, like it literally comes from observing the celestials. That like when you go into like the word divine literally means shining or the shining one. You see what I'm saying? Or of heaven, God. That's what Deus, Deva, those like that's where that word comes from. Deus is the root word of that word, and it literally means to shine. So like a lot of what they did was they concealed the truth of God, which is the natural phenomenon of electromagnetism. They cloak that in anthropomorphism, which allows them to control you psychologically through the imagery and the symbology of the religion. You see what I'm saying? So as long as you worshiping man and things of that nature, you're not studying nature. You're not studying physics. You're not studying those things that's going to actually progress man forward. You know what I'm saying? They're going to keep you on a rat race going around, in the hamster wheel, chasing superstitions and things of that nature. But if you read the book is literally telling you not to listen to them and to study nature and to follow nature, not to worship it. But there's nothing to worship. There's nothing to worship because we are all one being. We are all one in light. There's nothing to pray to because we're all one thing. We're all one experience. You know what I'm saying?
Listen,
Like,
listen, we need to like wrap this up. We're about to be in 3 hours. Mel, he's
Damn, you're breaking up too. I just want to say for the record before you come back, I agree with Mel, there's a lot of esoteric symbolism and things that are hidden in the
he is.
Catholic Church, but they always. My issue was like they do believe in God, but it's several gods. There's a lot of pantheism. There's a lot of paganism, but it's remember from the Council of Nicaea, they merged the pagan religion with Christianity, and it's still evident in the Vatican today. Not to mention that there's a great presence of Kemet, a lot of Kemetic artifacts in the Vatican. Well, you won't even get to see all of that, but it's definitely there. It's known that it's there. There's a lot of Kemetic representation, but he's gone. It was nice of him to let us come in and like what do you call bogart his whole presentation. I appreciate it. So to him, if he doesn't come back, thank you, Genesis. I'm gonna go ahead and
I'm in like a cold front too over here, so I
yeah,
think the internet is acting stupid. So
yeah, this was great. I'm gonna leave the panel, but I'm still listening. I just came back in because you said don't leave. Peace to James Cassell, and I didn't tell me how to say your name, Lord. I don't want to mess it up.
Laurel Burns.
Laurel.
yeah, that's it.
Laurel Burns. All right. Well,
Pete.
peace. I'm gonna leave and listen.
Okay, and let's quickly go ahead and round everything up, give a club. I want to say that I want to thank the brother because I think he's doing a good service to the community, whether you're a believer or non-believer. because he's coming from a more scholarly perspective on it. He's bringing you the what's pretty much called textual criticism. He's bringing that to the forefront, forcing believers to have to go see what the scholars are saying on their side to help and reconcile these things that he are calling contradictions, because I believe a lot of scholars have went on forward and reconciled these contradictions. But it's nothing wrong with the brother bringing it forth. There's nothing wrong with the brother coming and showing us that, hey, this is something to dig deeper into. He also is highlighting how a lot of historical changes has took place in Christianity, which is why I'm not a more of a religious observer type. He pointed out a lot of reasons why people shouldn't be these religious observer types, and that they should actually dig into these texts, see what the scholars are saying, and if they're going to be Christians, get back to more foundational Christianity instead of all these different things that have been compiled on top of the Christian message. And like I said, brother, keep up the work. I'll be here next week. And I'll really be here on whenever you do it, where we just deal with Mark. I'm really interested in doing that because I'm also more of a Markian priority guy myself. And I think we'll have a really good, interesting conversation on that and probably agree more than we disagree, especially when dealing with Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah, shalom and peace to everybody.
you want to go with Mel and hear his final words, because we're really like struggling here. My internet's struggling, his internet's struggling. It's weird because it's cold really here, and I think the internet is really struggling out. So
Right. Can you hear me okay?
yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Nepal just made a good point, because at the Vatican in Rome, you could they had the obelisk right in the middle of the courtyard. So that's a good indication of that obviously came from Africa. Also, when you go through Rome, you see a whole lot of them downtown. There's just so much influence from Egypt. It's not even funny. Even inside the Vatican, you see artifacts that stem from Kemet. It's like they don't try to hide it. So, and then they have other chambers where they really keep stuff that probably came or was pillaged from those lands. So that's a very good point that Nepal made. Am I making my final statement, by the way?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So James, he really hit the nail on the head. There's different levels to this whole thing. And I see it all. I see Sarnetta channel. I see all this. Everybody's constantly debating, and I think that's a beautiful thing. The problem is when you're just in the beginning stages where you don't know anything, you know enough to be dangerous to yourself. Let me give you an example. In the Jehovah's Witnesses faith, as I was growing up, I was one of the ones that made it to the top with the what they call the headquarters or what have you. I thought I was doing a great thing, a deed for God, right? As it says in the Bible. But there were a lot of young people in around 15, 16, because you can't have sex as a Jehovah's Witness, especially a teenager or whatever. But there were people that were committing, as they say, fornication, and some of the girls would get pregnant for whatever reason. You get baptized at 12, and by the time you're 14, 15, you're disfellowship, excommunicated. So now you got to come home, and your mom and dad don't want to talk to you. I live in Wappinger Falls, New York. About 8 miles from me, there's a bridge that a young kid jumped off when he was 18 years old in the winter, the very night that they announced that he had been excommunicated because his family was so divided and they wanted to kick him out of the house. The list goes on with these type of stories. But here's the problem. Some of those young people that would be cut off from the faith, they felt like they made a mistake because they were fornicating. So they now go live a life. They're through their 20s. They get married to someone. In the back of their mind, because they knew very little about the religion, when September 11th happened or Donald Trump becomes president, in their mind they think that means the end of the world, because they only learned enough when they were in their teens to think that that's the true religion. So they live the rest of their life wanting to go back. And to me, that's a terrible way to be, because you're trying to go back to something that's not even true and not even accurate. And I would really implore any and every one of you who, I mean, if you're here this long into this whole show that we're doing, you must have been touched by Christianity. You must be a Christian, Hebrew Israelite, whatever. But I say implore critical thinking, because there's nothing better. Understanding, like we went head to head over a couple words, young woman and virgin. We debated that for a whole what hour time or so. So that's what this is about. Critical thinking, and just make sure, before you go into a house, you want to make sure there's no bad guys in there or whatever. You just want to know. That's a good way to. That's how come we're alive today, because our ancestors had fear, which caused them to be a little paranoid. So they took less risk. And that's why we're here today, because we came through that line that wasn't risk takers. They weren't jumping off of bridges and running into the woods when they heard that noise. Those people died. See? So that's it. I like to encourage everybody to come back next week, Thursday. This is a long journey. This week we talked about, for those who came in late, I think it's worth looking into. Matthew and Luke contradict the birth of Jesus. Now, how you interpret that, how you feel about it, that's on you. But that's a big question that needs an answer. Why do they get the basics of Jesus' birthday wrong? Next week, we're going to talk about the death of Jesus. 4 different gospels. They all tell you a different story about his death. Some people say, well, yeah, it's just a sleight of the pen, just a mistake. It's just 4 different people giving their perspective. But as we get deeper into this, by week 3 and 4, I'm going to show you that Paul is deliberately changing the text. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you how Jesus misquotes from the Hebrew scriptures, but he's quoting the Greek Septuagint. Why is Jesus quoting the Greek Septuagint if he has lived before there was and had his hands into the inspiration of the Hebrew scriptures? Why is he not quoting from the Hebrew scriptures? Anyway, so that's what we're doing. And thank you guys for being a part of this. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to bonding with you guys. This is all love. There's no big debate here. We're not walking away from this thing mad at each other or whatever. I'm a type of person that if you tell me something that's actually legitimate, and you could say, well, listen, it meant young woman, and let me show you how it meant young woman. The Masoretic text was written after the Greek Septuagint, then I'm the type of guy, I'm going to say, oh, I didn't know that part. Now, that's not true, but I'm just saying, I would stop right there and take a note of that and then proceed. So that's what this is about. We can't just say, well, yeah, you're just wrong. I'm not going to listen, or else we won't grow. So thank you guys, and I appreciate you.
Listen, now they always say the same thing. I thank you, Mel. This is going to be an awesome series, and I look forward to getting the information. I'm learning so much. I've learned so much from the guests that came up on here. Thank you, Scam Chan. Thank you, Silky D. Thank you, Napasha Da. Thank you, JJ. Thank you. Who else was up here? Laurel. Thank you. Who else was up here? It was so many people up here.
Hemi.
Hemi. Thank you, Hemi.
James.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Thank everybody who Apollo Bay. Thank everybody who
Silky.
Silky. Yes, thank you, Silky D. Thank everybody who was a part of this conversation. And you know what? And Sugar Love started this whole tradition because I'm a DJ, right? And so what we do is when we end the show, we say, DJ take us out of here and go ahead and say it, and we're gonna end the stream. Say it, DJ take us out of here.
DJ take us out of here.
All right, sure.
Alchemize your energy. Darling, let your spirit be free. Don't give up. Keep on pushing through. Now is the time. It's all up to you. Alchemize your energy. My friend, let your spirit be free. Don't give up. Keep on pushing through. Now is the time. It's all up to you. No matter the storm, but over tragedy. No matter the storm, but over tragedy. No matter the storm, we will always take flight. Keep on pushing through the darkness of night. There's no limit, let's reach for the sky. Shine so bright, from darkness to light.